Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Hello, Mike Baker. What's happening, buddy?
Hey, you know what?
We turn to you.
We turn to you to find out what's happening.
Whenever shit gets completely sideways, it's time to bring in Mike Baker for some sort of analysis.
Yeah, that sounds very Sunday morning news talk show. Yeah, great.
I mean,
well, thanks, Chris Wallace, for having me.
Tell me what the fuck is going on. This place is falling apart. Who's running the show? What's happening?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for my antibody test. I'm psyched about
psyched.
that. Yeah,
you don't need that wacky booster.
No, I got that. I got a picture of it and everything.
So you must have been exposed. You've been vaccinated, but then you probably got exposed to COVID somewhere along the line recently. You said you had a day where you kind of run down.
I had a day where I was a little bit run down, and then, but I got the second of the vaccines shots was at the end of February. So that's, 7 months?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. And so, and those little lines on the, not that I understand it, I'm talking like I understand what I just looked at, but the lines on the antibody test results looked pretty damn good.
Pretty stiff. Stiff line there.
Very virile. And
looked
so,
good.
yeah. So I think, and I've been traveling like a son of a bitch, right? Over the past 3 or 4 months, there's no way I haven't been exposed. And I got the boys, right, going to school. Yeah. They're coming home, and it's not like they didn't bring back every germ ever invented before the pandemic.
Right.
So they're doing the same thing with COVID. So I'd have to assume at some point, I got exposed.
My kid got a regular cold recently.
No, oh my God. Do they still do that?
I didn't know they were still around. She got a
know.
regular cold. I was like, this is crazy.
I know. It's like, and it's this. There's so many things that are fucked up about this, but people have forgotten that every year, maybe you go out and you get your flu shot. It didn't mean you weren't going to come down with the flu that season. It just would be maybe a little bit better, right?
Yes.
And so, but now.
But this COVID thing was sold in a different way.
Yes.
It was not sold that you're going to get COVID, but it won't be that bad. Like Fauci was literally on TV saying you won't get it and you won't spread it to anybody.
Right.
Both those things are patently false.
Well, now we got President Biden wearing a mask yesterday, getting a booster. So,
do you think he got a booster? Do you think that was a real booster?
You mentioned that before we started talking, and I hadn't thought about it before. But you know what? When I watched it on TV, when I watched him getting his shot and his mask on. All I could think of was this is performance art. So the next step of performance art would be like not giving him the booster, but just giving him a shot. Right?
I think if they were going to give him a booster shot, the last thing they would do is give it to him live on television. What if he dies?
Right.
What if he blacks out? What if he gets hit and faints? Because people have had very bad reactions in the moment for whatever reason.
Right. No, they still. I think they still tell you. They give you the shot, and then they'll say stick around for 10 or 15 minutes. They want to make sure you don't, fall down.
Yeah.
And so, no, I agree because every other step of the way with any president, they're so careful.
Yes.
Right? So careful about the messaging, the optics, the security issues related to it. It would be not unheard of.
Unless
Let's put it that
Kamala
way.
Harris talked him into it. Ooh. She's like, go ahead, take it. Take a double. Give him a double.
I don't know. I don't think she wants the job anymore.
You don't think so?
No.
She seems quite quiet.
She's been very quiet.
Weird, right?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure. She may have left the country.
There were that fucking whole border thing. She's going to address the border. And now you look at it, you're like, what is going on down there?
Apparently she took care of it.
It's
under control.
They brought Haiti to the border. That's the crazy thing is how many Haitian folks are trying to get in.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What? I thought it was just Mexicans.
If you look at the map, it's not a logical migration, right? If you look at a map, right, you got Florida, which would seem to be, I don't know, maybe a natural point of landing.
Certainly closer.
Yes. And then you've got this diversion over to Texas. And but look, I mean, we've been seeing this happen for a while. I mean, I think it was Panama said, look, this time last year they were processing maybe 300, people coming in, and now they're up to 30,000 a day coming in. Yeah, mostly Africans and Haitians. And
into
others.
Panama?
Into Panama, yeah. So
30,000 a day?
Which is sort of the leading edge, right? These are the indicators that say we're going to have an issue, right? Because they're not going to Panama to stay in Panama. They're not going to Mexico to stay in Mexico, right? So it's a waypoint, and I get the idea. Everybody's looking for a better life. People want to get the hell out of some place that they don't see any future. used to be that if you were seeking asylum, you'd go to the next safe harbor, right? And that would be your point of, kind of where you're going. And I'm looking for asylum. But now you can pass through any country and then get to America and claim asylum, even though you've been going through a variety of other countries to get here. So I'm not sure how the definition changed at some point, but no, I think to get back to the original point, I think VP Harris, she's done a fine job with the border.
What the fuck is going on where he was saying that they're going to punish the guys who are on horses because they're strapping these Haitian immigrants? Like, did he not even watch that?
No.
Does it mean that's a crazy thing to say? Because isn't that defamatory?
It is, in
because they did not hit those guys with straps. Like he was pretending that they were whipping these guys.
Yeah,
that's not true.
No, it's not true. They use what are called split reins. It's a simple thing. I've been riding horses since I was a little kid, and what we're getting now is we're getting policy made by people in Washington D.C. who have no idea what a horse looks like, right? And they saw this picture, they leapt to a conclusion. The optic, from their perspective, was awful, right? And okay, yeah, you look at that and you go, okay, now put it in context. My thought when I see that picture is, I want to know what happened immediately before and what happened after.
But let me say something real quick.
Yeah.
It's impossible for him to be whipping him because he's grabbing him.
Right.
Look at his arm.
Yeah. No, and that's also
that is his arm, right?
Yeah, and that's also a rein. That's part of the rein.
It's a rein, but it's very clear that his hand is grabbing him, and his other hand is up there. There's no hand to whip him.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
No, but that doesn't matter. That's not fact. But facts don't matter in Washington anymore. Facts don't matter anywhere anymore.
I just can't imagine that they don't matter when you're the actual president. It's one thing if you're CNN and you're just full of shit, but this is not. This is just the president of the United States saying that someone would be held accountable for strapping these people. Well, that's just a lie.
They're taking the horses away from the Border Patrol. That's how stupid the world is now. They're based on that because the optic in their mind, again, it's not the reality. It's the narrative now that they can glom onto. They can now make decisions such as taking away one of the most effective tools with the Border Patrol in that part of the country is the horse, right? And now they're going to take it away. And so you've got Jen Psaki up in Washington, D.C. proclaiming these things as if she's been an equestrian all her life and she understands exactly what she's talking about.
What did she
doesn't know
say?
Shit. Well, that's exactly what she said. She's taking away the horses from the Border Patrol. So they're
because of the optics that came from that.
Oh, she didn't say because of the optic, but she said because
it's too effective?
Well, no, they don't care. It's again, it's not tied to any logical reason. That's the part that's so bizarre. It's not tied to because this happened, we're doing X. It's just because of this photo, literally. And now the media's walked the dog back a little bit, and they've said, okay, yeah, we get it. Those are reins. That's not a whip, and so we understand. Oh, okay, fine. So we shouldn't be chasing
split
people.
Split reins is that instead of a loop that goes from one side of the horse's mouth to the other, there's two separate strings.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or,
and so
pieces of leather or whatever it is.
The reins are split.
Right.
Exactly what it says. And so that's, again, I keep going back to that one point, which is it doesn't really matter what the facts are anymore. As an example, today was, now I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but today was hearings up on the Hill. The Senate Armed Services Committee was holding hearings. So who did they have? They had Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. They had CENTCOM Commander General McKenzie, great guy. They had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley. So they all, to the last one, said, yes, we were advising the president that our advice is to maintain a small troop presence, minimum of 2,500 troops, right, in Afghanistan. And our belief was not that it would collapse as quickly as it did, but that it would collapse if you took those advisors, those troops out, that it would collapse maybe by this fall. And yet you've got the president saying, I don't recall being told any of that. And that's okay now because nobody's questioning it, right? Nobody's saying, well, hold on. No, how about some pushback? How about saying, what do you mean you don't recall? This is one of the most important decisions you've made or will be making. And you don't recall whether your senior, top military advisors were telling you that in their advice, keep the troops in there for a period of time. And he's saying, I don't remember. And there's really no serious pushback. This whole hearing, if anybody wants to know what Washington, D.C. is like and how that city runs, I'd recommend maybe on Thursday watching some more of these hearings on the Afghanistan process, because it's just, on one hand, it's very depressing. It's just a shit show. You've got the senators on the Armed Services Committee who have been there, who have been privy to all sorts of intelligence over the past few years, right? Now sitting in a hearing to understand what happened, what went wrong with the Afghan withdrawal, and they're all acting as if, they could be surprised by this. When these politicians have been sitting up at Capitol Hill, being briefed on this shit, having the opportunity to ask questions, doing all the things they should be doing, but now because it's all theater, now they get to sit in a hearing in front of some of the senior military commanders and act as if they're a little bit surprised by all of this. And, oh my God, how did it happen? How can we prevent it from happening again? Senator Jeanne Shaheen actually asked that. I think it was of Milley, saying, well, how do we prevent this from happening again? Are you fucking kidding me?
Happening again?
Yeah. That's your question?
Jesus Christ.
Anyway, it's I tell you what, it's been a fascinating period of time.
Let me ask you this. So the president has the ability to say whatever if someone advises him to leave 2,500 troops, he has the ability to say, I don't think so. No troops.
Yes, he does. So he can take all that advice, and the military leaders are saying, look, we provided this advice.
Right.
And
that's a strange thing, right? That one man has the ability to make all these decisions. I mean, obviously this is what the president is, right?
He's commander-in-chief.
But one man has the ability to make these economic decisions, these decisions about healthcare, these decisions about taxes, these decisions about the military, these decisions about the future of the troops. I mean, there's even this discussion that they're throwing around about making it so troops that won't get vaccinated, they get dishonorably discharged. Have you seen that?
No. That's a new one on me.
A discussion. Find out if that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if they can do that. But there was a soldier, and she had made a video, and she is releasing this video explaining what's happening, that they're going to get discharged if they refuse to get vaccinated.
I can't believe they would dishonorably discharge them. That'd be a real fucking shock if that's what they were doing.
See if that's true. It might have been exaggerated in an article, like for the headline.
Yeah.
But I think that they're planning on doing something along those lines.
Well, look, I mean, it is. I think it does surprise people sometimes when they see the extent, and if they were watching these hearings and understanding the information flow about Afghanistan. Look, there was a lot of talk, right, in the aftermath of this withdrawal clown show. That what happened? Who was advising who? How did we miss certain pieces of intelligence? And there's a lot to figure out there. But the idea that the president would sit there in his office with all these senior advisors around, and they would say, "Sir, here are your options," because that's always basically what they're doing. And theoretically, they are supposed to be strong enough to argue their point as strongly as possible, right? They're not there to just go along. So they all come in. They say, "We think you should be, keeping troops in there," and the president then steps away. And now Milley, McKenzie, the others, they all said that Biden listened very, seriously to them. But there was a political decision here, right? That political decision was, we're getting the hell out. Now, the interesting thing is that Biden, he kind of wants to have it both ways, right? He wants to take credit for being brave and saying, we're getting the hell out, right? But then he also wants to blame the previous administration for the reason why he had to be getting the hell out. Right, so he wants to blame the Doha Agreement that Trump signed in February of 2020. And
what was that?
Well, that was when the Trump administration made a deal with the Taliban, and in February of 2020, and basically it had conditions within that. And General Milley and McKenzie talked about those conditions, I think, today, and they're in the hearings, actually. There were 7 conditions placed on the Taliban for this agreement to go forward. And there was a May withdrawal date. Now, the administration, the previous administration, and people don't want to hear this shit, right? Because they're so entrenched in their own camp, right? So people who are on the hard left, they're not going to want to hear the fact that the Doha Agreement was based on conditions, right? But the most senior military commanders today reaffirmed that, yes, there were 7 conditions for that agreement to follow through, for us to follow through. We had 8 conditions for the U.S. And now, during the course of the discussions and the negotiations, and this whole agreement was based on a power sharing. The idea was we want to create an opportunity for the Taliban and the Afghan government. We want them all to come together and create a power sharing agreement. Well, on one hand, you could argue and say that's never going to happen.
Sounds crazy.
Yeah, it sounds crazy. But that's where they were. And you could also argue, and again, because people are so entrenched, no one's want to give any credit to whether they want to give credit to Biden or they want to give credit to Trump or any Republican president or Democrat president. The Trump administration did kind of broker the hard, heavy lift of saying we're getting the hell out, right? There had been talk around the edges in previous administrations about how long we're going to be there, right? But the Trump administration did finally actually say, fuck it, let's get a negotiation, let's go, and let's set a timeline to get the fuck out after 20 years. Right or wrong. So they put that on the table. They set the table for that hardline withdrawal. But the Taliban never met those conditions. The only thing they did was not attack U.S. troops directly. But as Milley and Mackenzie said today, they never met any of the other conditions. So it had been explained to the Taliban that if that was the case and you don't meet these conditions, we're not going to leave in May. We're going to just keep pushing the withdrawal date further to the right.
So why was the decision made to withdraw then?
Well, look, in part, I think because I think everybody got behind the idea that we can't stay there forever. Because I think everybody, understood that it just wasn't happening. They weren't buying what we were selling. They never have, right? I mean, and you don't want to be completely fatalistic all the time, but with Afghanistan, it's not a bad frame of reference to remember all the other times that things like this have failed. And so the idea that somehow we were going to build a stable pseudo-democratic government in Afghanistan was always flawed, and there was never really any evidence to show that was going to happen. And it was propped up, and I think nobody really wanted to tell the truth in positions of leadership, whether it was military or government or intel community. And so I think there was general agreement that we gotta get the fuck out. And then it came down to, well, how do we do that, right? And we faced some of the same problems that the old Soviets faced getting the hell out of Afghanistan. But I think with this case, part of it was we had pulled advisors off the Afghan units, 2-3 years ago, right? That had been a process. So the withdrawal process had been going on for a number of years, over the past decade or so, in a sense, right? We'd been drawing back, pulling out some resource, pulling out troops, lowering the troop numbers, putting more responsibility on contractors. And once you take the advisors out of the Afghan units, right, in a sense, you don't have really eyes and ears, right, inside the Afghan military. So you can have, President Ghani or, some bullshit Afghan commander just telling you whatever you want to hear. But you didn't have a lot of folks at ground level working with the troops saying, all right, this shit's not going to hold, right? Particularly after the Doha Agreement, right? Once I think that the Doha Agreement was made, I think the writing's on the wall, and even the Afghan military could see it, right? And they could read it. And they could say, okay, this shit's not going to happen. We're not going to keep getting money. We're not going to keep getting advisors. And we're not going to get the air support that is really the only thing that keeps us in power. So, at some point, over a period of a few years, we were degrading our own ability to actually understand just how bad it was getting, right? And so then it became a logistical exercise. You got to move personnel and you got to move material out of the country. And that's where you could argue it all kind of went sideways.
Well, they left behind how much shit?
A lot of shit.
A lot of shit. Mm-hmm. Crazy shit, right?
No, we left
Blackhawks.
Yes, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars as a conservative estimate.
Why?
That's a conservative estimate. Well, because partly because you could argue that some of the material was decommissioned. Some of the heavier platforms were made non-functioning. Okay, fine. I don't know. To answer the question, I don't know why the military wouldn't have moved more of the gear, the light gear out there. In other words, the night vision devices, the weaponry, right? The small arms, ammunition. Why not spend 3 or 4 months getting that gear the hell out, right? You don't have the troops that require them.
Right.
So now you've got all this shit stored. Now the thought could have been that this is for the Afghan military. They're going to hold. But here's the thing that interesting point that came out from General Milley and General McKenzie during these hearings is that they're stating, and I have no reason not to believe them, they're stating that the general consensus by the fall of 2020, right, was that without the troops in there, once you take the U.S. troops out and the money, then the government's going to collapse probably by fall of this year.
And
right?
it took like 3 hours.
Yeah, it took 11 days. Now, in a classic piece of Washington speak, I think it was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in answering a question, said, "No, we never saw any assessment that said that the government would collapse in 11 days." He's very specific, right? He's not saying in short order.
Yeah.
He's just saying 11. I didn't see one for 11 days. We had one for like 2 weeks. But so that's just the shit that happens on the side.
So they assumed that the Afghan army eventually was not going to fight the Taliban.
Yes. Yeah. So there was what they're saying is and look, the intel community, we've been talking about that for years. We knew. All you had to do was study the Soviet papers during their time, their occupation in Afghanistan, to understand how we were likely going to replay that scenario, and we did, right? So, you could argue that what should have happened was years ago we should have looked around and thought this is a bullshit exercise, right? Doesn't mean that and I think the military today. The senior commanders today and during this week, I think you'll see them make a huge effort to say, first and foremost, the veterans and everyone who fought there and all the hardship, it wasn't in vain. I think they're going to focus on that, and they're going to say, because for 2 decades, we haven't been attacked on our home soil, and in a narrow definition. Yes, that's why we went in. And then it kind of got blown up into this idea that we were going to create like this bastion of democracy in Afghanistan.
But it's been widely known forever that Afghanistan is insane. Like, it's impossible to manage.
Yeah.
The Soviets couldn't handle it. The whole area is incredibly mountainous. Like, it's very remote. It consists of these little clans that are run by warlords. Like, it's not like Kabul is essentially the only real city, right?
Yeah.
Are there other cities there that are real cities?
There are, but they're still run like little fiefdoms. And like
fiefdom is a good word.
I know, right? I
like how you pulled that out.
Write that down.
Write that one down.
Fiefdom. I can't
know
because I don't know how to spell it.
It's like something from The Hobbit. What is a fiefdom? Do you know what a fiefdom is, Jamie?
Yeah, see what the spelling on fiefdom.
While we're at
F-E-E-F.
While we're talking to you, did you find anything out about the dishonorable discharge thing?
Yeah, so I had to dig through it. I found, starting like with this, it says the White House opposes a provision banning it.
So they oppose a provision banning dishonorable discharge, so they keep it open.
Well,
so it's possible.
So again, it hasn't happened yet. And then like digging through the military.com, I think was the best. This one, yeah. So like, here's a good explanation. I think
troops who refuse to be inoculated may not necessarily face dishonorable discharge or even separation, according to Kirby. But I don't like that word, may not necessarily. I don't like that phrasing.
Yeah, that's definitely Washington phrasing.
Yeah. The Pentagon has repeatedly stopped short of saying it will boot troops for refusing the shot. Commanders will have a range of options that stop short of punishment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Kirby said. The services will also allow religious exemptions to the vaccine. But that's a weird one. Couldn't like everybody say I got a religious exemption?
Look at this. Actually, there's a really good quote down here. When an individual declines to take a mandatory vaccine, they will be given an opportunity to talk to both their medical providers as well as their own chain of command. Yeah, you know how excited they're going to be to go in and talk to their own chain of command so that they can fully understand the decision they are making. That sounds like going in and talking to a high-value target. I want you to fully understand the decision you're making right here. Go.
Yeah.
That's look. That talk about a pivot, but we go from Afghanistan to
I just
the
wanted,
COVID
while
thing.
we were talking to Jamie, I just wanted to clear it up.
Yeah, no, that's but
there's a fiefdom.
fiefdom. Oh, wait a second. Look, see. I'm going to put that
organization or department over which one dominant person or group exercises control. The Duke's fiefdom had been greatly expanded as a reward for his dutiful military service on behalf of the king.
As it should have been. As it should have been, because he was a fine, fine lad.
So the point is that Afghanistan you can't really control it. It's incredibly rugged terrain. You're not going to get vehicles in there, right? It's mostly mountainous areas, unless you're flying helicopters.
If you don't have air support, and that's really where this fell down. And the idea, and there's been a lot of talk about why did we close Bagram, right? Why did they close the air base before they'd finished this whole process, right? So I guess one of the things is this is very layered, and again, as with just about everything else that goes on in the world today, because everybody's got like attention deficit disorder. Nobody takes the time to look at all the various layers, right? So this fell down, as you said before, it fell into teams, right? So you're either pro Biden or you're not, right? Yeah. You're either pro vaccine or you're not. It's always and that's not the case, right? There's all sorts of ground in between those two positions, and so I think with Bagram, the idea was, in a sense, that wasn't there necessarily because it's some. Bagram Air Base is like 30 miles away from the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. And so would that have been an effective departure point, for all the people we were looking to move out during the withdrawal? Okay, you could argue it would be helpful, right? But it wasn't right there. And that's our point. Well, Hamid Karzai Airport was right there. It was much more immediate. We needed to secure that. And by the way, if we were going to keep Bagram open, we needed, upwards of 5,000 or 6,000 troops to secure it. Right? But it all comes back to this idea that, the agreement with the Taliban, because both sides are using it, right, in sort of an effort to cover their own ass. So the Democrats are using it because, well, we were boxed in. We had no choice. Right? Look, Trump made a bad deal, right? And so we had to go with it, right? Because if we didn't go with it, the Taliban would start attacking us again. Well, yeah, no shit, right? But there you go. And the Republicans are using it, by saying there were conditions built into the agreement. And you didn't have to honor the agreement. Now, that would have meant we would have had to probably put more troops in, to secure the people that we already had there, the advisors that were there. So it's a morass, right? And over top of all that is this general feeling, I think, that most people had that it was time to leave, right? So again, it's the process of leaving. It wasn't the decision to leave. It was the process of how you executed that. And Bagram was kind of a central point in that because if you could maintain air cover for the Afghan military, right, during the point when you're withdrawing, you can prevent the Taliban from doing what they did, which was that immediate, overrun of the country. They couldn't do it with our air support, without our air support, I mean.
So the questions that someone would have on the outside is, did this, when this happened, did this strengthen the Taliban? And did it strengthen not just the military position because they have all these new weapons and everything, but did it also strengthen morale because they now force the Americans out and beat them and then punished all of the allies that worked with the Americans, which is devastating because you got to think now people are going to be way more reluctant to cooperate with Americans and help them in a similar situation because we kind of abandoned all those people that were translators, all those people that there was a lot that got left behind, right?
Yeah, there were, and
some got rescued.
They're claiming. I think look. What's happening is they're trying to say, look, the withdrawal process was a huge success, I think
really said that?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, President Biden said this was an extraordinary success, the whole process. Now, I think strategically, you could argue that it's not a success. From a logistical operation, did they lift a lot of people out of the country in a short order of time? Yes, but was it chaotic? Absolutely. Did things happen that shouldn't have had to happen? Yeah, so I think it's really hard to define this as a success, but you get, in their position they got to spin it the best they can. But if you think about, what you were just saying, in a small sense, it's tough enough. If I'm in Afghanistan and I'm trying to develop sources inside the country while I'm there that can tell me about Taliban movement, right? So I'm trying to convince some tribal elder somewhere for whatever reason. Maybe his kid was killed by the Taliban, right? Maybe the Taliban, took his, underage daughter into marriage. Maybe they denied him medical care. Whatever. You're always looking for. It doesn't matter whether it's this case or whether you're recruiting anybody. You're always looking for a point of weakness, right? In a sense, it sounds wrong, but you're looking for leverage. And so I'm trying to convince this person to work with me, right, and provide me with intelligence. Well, now that's counter to his best interest in a sense, right? Because he's probably going to think, okay, well, if I get found out, I'm getting whacked, right? So it's not going to end well for me. Now, imagine trying to do that now when you don't have a presence on the ground. You still need that insight. You still need those people reporting to you. But now you've just, gotten off the X and left some people there, and you've bugged out, and they look at this and go, well, what the hell is my incentive for helping the Americans, providing them? And this feeds into, I'm jumping all over the fucking place. This feeds into this talk now that's become the favorite phrase in Washington of over-the-horizon capability, which means conducting operations from a distance because you don't have resources within that area of operations. So you're over the horizon, but you're going to dip in occasionally whenever you need to and carry out some type of operation. And so, yeah, to answer your question, it makes it very, very difficult. Morale was already not good. Once the Doha Agreement, I think, was signed, and again, look, I think the Doha Agreement. Somebody had to finally memorialize the idea that we were getting the fuck out of Afghanistan, right?
Right.
And so they did.
Is it a good thing that we got out of Afghanistan?
In a very pragmatic sense, yes. Yeah. Because I don't know what the hell we were doing there. I mean, the idea was, fine, we go in initially and we punish those who were responsible for 9/11, right? And we tell them, don't let this happen again, and then we should have gotten the hell out, right, and avoided the last 20 years because we'd had a recent case study with the Russians. We knew from what the Russians did there, how it could end and how it likely could end, and yet we thought, because there's always hubris involved, we thought we're going to do better. Look, the Taliban had no place to go when the Russians were there, right? So they're just going to wait it out. It's like Vietnam. The Viet Cong had nowhere to go. They're going to wait, right? They know we're rolling troops out there on a 6 or 8 or 12-month deployment. They're going to go home, and they want to get home. These people have no place to go. Taliban, again, same thing this time around. So I don't know why anybody should be surprised about the overall result. But yes, I do think it was time to go. I think it was time to go quite some time ago. That was very poetic. But anyway, yeah, it's just nobody spoke the truth in Washington about the situation in Afghanistan because nobody wanted to hear it, right? And they felt that it wasn't politically a good move. And so nobody wanted to stand up because they're all so fucking worried about their jobs and say, this is my opinion, so what it's worth, and say the tough things about the situation there. Either because they felt like if I say something negative about what we're doing in Afghanistan, it's disrespecting the troops, which it's not, right? Or, I'll probably get drummed out of my, nice political position, right? So, yeah, that's and when you watch hearings that take place in Washington, D.C., the whole thing is about just finding somebody to blame other than your own self or your party.
And it seems like no one's going to get blamed.
No one's going to get blamed. No. That would mean that there would be accountability, and I don't think I don't know when that happened last in Washington D.C.
So how do you think they could have pulled out and made it less of a clusterfuck?
Well, I think they have to look. They pulled the advisors out. There were two parts to this, right? There's the whatever they call it, the retrograde, right, and drawing down the troops, right, and the troops that we had there, right, the 2,500 were basically to train, advise, and assist. Right, well, that's very, very important, right, for the presence. It almost becomes at that troop level, almost becomes an optic, but that's still important to boost the ability of the Afghan military to hold their shit together.
And this 2,500 was the one that they had advised that they leave behind.
Yeah.
What was the total amount of troops that were there before it pulled out?
It was coming down. It was before the inauguration, we were probably in the 5,000 to 4,000 range. We had probably 3,000 or so paramilitary troops there from the agency. We probably had, I don't know how many contractors, a few thousand more contractors. So it was a significant, at that point, it was a significant presence, but it was a significant drawdown from even a couple of years ago, right? So, again, the drawdown had been happening, right? And if you look at, and so you had the retrograde of the military operation, and then you had this evacuation, right, or this withdrawal of all the, diplomatic personnel, the other Americans there, the SIVs, all of those people, and that you could consider as sort of a separate operation, and that's the withdrawal part of the whole thing that took place that seemed so chaotic and was, right? But the military also, look, the military is very good at planning a variety of scenarios, right? So it's not like they didn't think there's a chance this whole thing goes to shit, right? And so they pre-positioned troops. They had a lot of air assets available, right? But again, it's at a certain point you could think of it in terms of a UPS operation, right? You're moving, in this case, you're moving people and you're moving stuff, right? And I just think that we completely botched the job of understanding how shitty the government and military capability was there, right? And that is down to bad intelligence. It's down to political maneuvering in Washington and just a desire to get the hell out and maybe ignoring assessments. Because whether you're saying your assessment is, as General McKenzie and General Milley are saying, is that by the end of 2020 they were basically advising the president and his team that things could fall to shit in a matter of months, right? Or whether you're saying things could fall to shit in a matter of a couple of weeks, you have to plan for the worst case scenario. That's your job. So their default position should have been, this thing's going to collapse in a couple of hours. And they didn't do that. And I'm not quite sure, why, but I don't suspect we're ever going to get full transparency on this because, again, it's not the way Washington works.
Do you get concerned when you see all this sort of woke ideology making its way into the military? I know you've seen these.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I got a lot of calls about the CIA recruitment video.
Yeah, what the fuck was that? Explain that to me.
Yeah, that was look, somebody decided that the right messaging for trying to improve recruitment ability for the agency, and mind you, the agency isn't lacking in candidates, right? We have a lot of people applying for the agency. But at some point, someone thought the right message was to just go all out on the, whatever you want to call it, the woke issue and the inclusion, and so they had an individual who basically spent her time talking. While she said she didn't want to be identified in such a manner or such a manner, then she then proceeded to identify herself in these various categories.
Right.
And I just think somebody should have test marketed that message inside the agency first before they decided to run with it, because they took a lot of heat, and people just thought it was ridiculous. But I get what they're doing. You have to have, from an operational perspective, set aside all the woke issues and the desire to be inclusive and everything. Just from an operational perspective, you want an intel service that is remarkably diverse, because you're operating all over the world,
right?
And you don't want everybody to have the same mindset and the same ideas and sitting around a table dealing with a potential problem, because they're all going to throw the same idea at it, right?
Right.
So you want a variety of personalities and backgrounds and everything. But I just think that they could have test marketed that one a little better. But
it's not just about the agency too.
No.
There was another one that was who was the person that was put in charge of, like, there was someone who was put in charge of inclusiveness and diversity in the military, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't there?
Yeah.
And people are like, hey, what the fuck is this about? This is all woke talk. And when woke talk invades the military, like woke to me is like well-intentioned people that have bought into a cult. That's what a lot of it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like well-intentioned. Like if you look at that, like we should.
I guess I go with that. Yeah.
We should celebrate all of our differences, and we should have people that feel comfortable in all walks of life, whether it's gay, straight, bi, trans, black, white, Mexican, Asian. Everyone should be included.
Yeah.
And it should be a meritocracy based on your performance, and you should look at, you know, all these factors that make this United States a wonderful place with all these different kinds of human beings, and we should celebrate that. But it's not just that. It's highlighting that to the point of that being the primary concern. The primary concern being inclusiveness and diversity, and highlighting these various minority groups.
Yeah.
Highlighting them to the point where you're thinking about that more than you're thinking about anything else.
Operational effectiveness or capability, experience,
and you're seeing
actual
that
qualities.
In corporations are running into this problem where they have to have a certain amount of people, regardless of their qualifications, that fit these certain criteria. And people are going, well, this is not good for our overall bottom line. This is not good for the machine that we're running.
Oh.
What you're doing is you're doing something that's good for your optics,
Right.
but you could perhaps hire someone who is lesser qualified but has these very specific characteristics that you think will appeal to the woke crowd. The problem with that is the woke crowd is never satisfied.
Oh, no.
They will keep pushing left to the end of time until we're in a communist shithole. They're not going to stop.
Well, you never, and that's, I think some people miss that sometimes. You're never, ever, ever, no matter who you are and what your thought process is and what you believe, you're never going to be righteous enough for the mob. You're never pure enough for the mob.
Thank you.
And that is absolutely true.
100%.
Yeah, and I think everybody, no matter where you are on that political spectrum and what your beliefs are, you might want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, because it's not, they're not really, you know, like the whole idea is that they're about kindness and consideration. That's horseshit. They're about control. And they're using kindness and consideration and inclusiveness, all these things, as talking points to allow them to exercise control. This is an ideology. It's a cult. It really is.
Yeah.
It's a weird one. It's a weird one because it's sort of embedded itself in our universities, and then now it's made its way into corporations. And when I see it in the military, I get very fucking concerned, because my concern is, how do we know that this shit isn't manipulated and put into there by foreign governments, by foreign intelligence agencies? I'm sure you've seen that video from, did you ever see the video from the KGB? There was a guy from the KGB in the 1980s that was talking about the plan to destroy America. Have you ever seen that video?
I have, yeah. I know what you're talking
It's
about.
a wild video.
Yeah.
Should we play it?
Yeah.
Do you know the video, Jamie?
If it's still up and running.
Play a little bit of this. Yeah. This is KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov's warning to America. Let's listen to some of this.
Before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets used the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why
Sells a lot of
the
deodorant.
Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them. They are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place and
Yes.
who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. Obviously they will join the links of dissenters, dissidents. Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their...
We're seeing this
beautiful
happen right now.
ideas.
I mean, this goes on. This is a 13-minute video. The title of it is KGB Defector Yuri Bezmenov's Warning to America. You should watch it. It's on YouTube. It's fucking wild, and it's so accurate. It is exactly what's happening. This guy was talking about it in the 1980s. When was it?
1990s.
29 years ago.
Yeah.
From 2013, so.
Yeah, but that's when it was posted. I don't believe it's from that. I believe it's from the 1980s. Can you scroll down and see if it says?
It didn't say. That's what I was looking. Maybe in the comments, but.
Bezmenov, I'm trying to think of...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. See, it says 29 years ago he said it. So, yeah, what is that? What's 29 years ago?
I mean, it doesn't really matter. He could
82.
be talking. He could be talking
82?
in
82 if it's, or 84.
84. Yeah, I think it's 84.
He could be talking in the 1950s.
But it
Yeah,
says
for all
29
matters,
years
yeah.
ago from 2013.
Yeah, 84. 85.
85.
84.
Okay, so
Okay.
Imagine how accurate that is. Imagine that this guy nailed. First of all, he's talking about social justice back then. That was a term that really didn't make its way into the vernacular of the American public until about 10, 15 years ago. I mean, when you really started hearing social justice as a common term, like when was that?
Well, that was even more recent than 10 or 15 years ago.
Probably,
I think, for
right?
most people, yeah.
Let's just say 10.
Yeah.
So this is like we've resisted as long as we can. But we're fucked. You know, I was watching this video on my favorite Twitter channel, Libs of TikTok, because it is insane. Some of these fucking kids that are coming up through these universities that are saying these buzzwords and talking points as if they make sense, and they're talking about the destruction of the American civilization, like the destruction of the American country, that it needs to happen in order for people to be fair and free. And I'm like, and replace with what?
Yeah.
Like, this is the thing. It's like you have these shallow-minded, very narrow perspectives of what they would like to accomplish with no view whatsoever of what the future looks like. Whereas this guy, this KGB defector, is talking about this very long game that the KGB was playing with the United States.
Yeah, well, and they don't, you know, they're not the only ones, right? The Chinese intel service is actually much more patient than the Russians even. But what he's talking about, what Bezmenov's talking about in terms of active measures, you know, we might call in the U.S. covert action campaign. It really is. Now he's lowballing the amount of resource they spend on actual, you know, intel operations and other things, but he's making a very important point, which is from their perspective, you get more bang for your buck from the active measures campaigns.
Yeah.
And we've been doing, you know, look, every intel service that's, you know, worth its weight is in a sense doing the same thing. You could argue that.
How do we do it? Like,
well,
what
you
are
could
we doing
argue
with
that
China?
Voice of America is, as an example. Right?
Fast and the Furious 9? Is that what they're doing with
yeah.
that?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's it's our movies, it's our blue jeans, it's our rock albums that destroyed the Soviet Union. But we look what he's saying there all those years ago. All you have to do is look at the way that the misinformation campaigns have been going, that the Russians have been working on during the past 6 years, 5 years, right? Where in part one of the things they're doing is, to your earlier point, they're using sort of our woke culture, right? And they're turning it into a wedge, right? And so they understand that if you can create chaos or you know, ratchet up the pressure for whether it's racism or sort of the divide between the right and the left, whatever it may be, that's to their advantage. And so that's what they do. They start out by saying, how do we influence public opinion? And just like a marketing firm, right, they do all of the things that you would think, right? They study, they do all the analysis of how do you shift an audience even 5 or 6 degrees to one side or the other of an argument, right? And then you multiply that, unlike a marketing campaign, which is looking to get returns for its shareholders over the course of the next year or the next couple of quarters because they want to sell more Coke or whatever they're doing. You know, as you pointed out, they're talking about 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, right? So that, in part, makes it even more effective. It's nothing new. The Russians have been doing this. They were doing it during World War II, right? You know, and so it's not it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but people don't see it when it's right in front of them, right? They just read their Twitter feed, right? Or they read something on YouTube, or they read something on Instagram, and they take it at face value, and it just inflames them a little bit further, right? And it confirms, you know, because look, this thing says it. Nobody does the research. Nobody wants to go 2 or 3 or 4 steps to figure out how did this thing originate? Where's this from? Right? Who's saying this? And
are we being manipulated?
We're being manipulated, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not just the Russians. The Chinese are engaged in the same game, right? They understand if you can create dissent within the U.S. and everything that was being done in the last election was designed to create distrust of the election system, whether it's from the right or the left, right? Ultimately, do they give a fuck who wins? Not really. They just want to create the chaos and the distrust of the system, and that is important from their end game. That's what they're really striving for. And we don't see it because it's staring us in the face, and we can't get our noses out of our phones, and we believe whatever's put in front of us, and everybody gets further and further siloed into their own opinion. And then you got nothing. Right?
It's also, there's so much emphasis put on boogeymen, right? The boogeyman of Donald Trump, like he's the boogeyman. He's bad. This is what the problem is, and ignoring, like, like the Clinton Russia collusion story, right? I don't know if you've been paying attention to Russell Brand. Russell Brand.
Yeah.
This is a crazy thing because Russell Brand, who I love dearly, I think he's awesome. But he was this comedic actor and stand-up comedian, and now he's become one of the most trusted journalists in some weird way. Right? Like, he's a guy, like, when he talks about stuff, he's got his notes.
Right.
He's very informed, and he's discussing, like, what Clinton was saying that Trump was doing, they were actually doing.
Yeah.
They were actually colluding with Russia. Like, it's actually a real thing.
Yeah, and nobody wants to revisit. I mean, nobody has an interest in revisiting anything because it doesn't verify their narrative. Nobody wants to go back and say, well,
It's
look, we
also
might have made a
overwhelming.
mistake, and so we don't want it to. And yes, you're right. People don't explain it well, and so it becomes too complicated. And I think, shit, I got to cook dinner, or I got to do it. I'm not going to bother.
Right.
I just want to read this top line, 2 or 3 sentences, and then that's my opinion. Yeah, it's like but Russell Brand, good point. It's like what's his name? Jeff Skunk Baxter from the Doobie Brothers has become like a noted military technology authority.
Is he
right?
really?
Yeah, he's been up on Capitol Hill
From the Doobie Brothers?
From the Doobie Brothers. Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I got my guy right. Been up on the Hill testifying about weapons and military development and
Where did he get educated on this?
I don't know. Michael McDonald, maybe. I'm not sure.
Maybe he was like a CIA plant all the time. That's like one of the big theories about a lot of the stuff that happened during the 1960s, right?
Yeah.
Because wasn't Jim Morrison's dad in the agency?
I don't know about Jim Morrison. Stuart Copeland from the Police, his dad was.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I think it was like Jim Morrison's dad was some sort of intelligence operative. Is that correct? Is
Jim
that the
Morrison might have been as well.
Yeah. According to that, his father was the rear admiral in charge during the Gulf of Tonkin.
Oh.
Wow.
Well, there you go then.
Well, that's about as fuckery gets, right?
So now we figured out the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Oh God, no! But the Bezmenov thing, I think I'm glad you pulled that up because that is something that people should watch and take away something from, because it does talk about the idea of manipulation but again, what's going to happen is, people who have a certain mindset are going to look at that and go, "Oh, that's bullshit," right? I mean, if they're on the hard left, or they believe that Marxism is the way to go, no, you're not going to ever change their mind. Just like somebody on the hard right's not going to change their mind,
Right.
And so once again, you're left with a dwindling center. But speaking of weapons technology, the U.S. just tested a hypersonic weapon, and that's something to keep an eye on when people are thinking, where's all the money going next? I mean, it's really the top priority for the U.S. It's a top priority for Russia. It's a top priority for China. So anyway, the U.S. just the other day successfully tested a new new air-breathing hypersonic
Mach 5
weapon.
hypersonic missile. What does Mach 5 mean?
That's about
Five
Mach
times the speed of
5,
sound.
It's about 3,800 and a change in terms of miles per hour. 3,800 some odd miles per hour.
5 times the speed of sound.
Yeah. Yep.
Jesus.
I know. And the whole idea is, when people say, well, why is hypersonics? Why is that important? It's because whoever develops this capability first on the planet basically has defeated all air defense systems, right? Which in the past were always designed for ballistic missiles. And so it moves at such a rate that you've removed the reaction time. And it also can move in such an unpredictable fashion. A ballistic missile goes up and it comes down, and it's all in a certain pattern. And you can
see
predict
the numbers
that.
there?
Yeah.
A mile a second.
Yeah. So you can imagine that coming, and you imagine having no time to react because you don't even know where it's coming from.
Right.
And so basically, that's why hypersonic weapons and the ability to counter them is really the top technology priority for the U.S., and it's where a lot of we'll talk about where money goes. So where a lot of money goes, and because the Russians and the Chinese are busy trying to develop this, because whoever does it, again, it renders existing air defense systems useless.
Which brings me to UFOs. Tell me what you know.
Well, if I may,
I think there's some shit going down.
there is some shit going down, and it's actually really interesting. And this would be a perfect time for me to plug the second season of my Science Channel Discovery Network series, Black Files Declassified.
Science Channel, Black Files Declassified, hosted by Mike Baker. Look at that handsome bastard.
that.
Look at you.
I now run a global intelligence and security firm. My experiences have given me unique insight and access to a secretive world. Each year, the U.S. government hides over $60 billion in a black budget, hidden away, unseen, unexplained.
Holy smokes, look at that. Look at the light. Go for it, go. Holy shit.
The money funds classified programs, projects, operations, and tech developments. And each of these activities is a black file. Now, travel with me as we open up the black files. What you learn will change the way you think about our past and our future.
Look at that. That looks very exciting, Mike.
Everybody should be watching.
They
Everybody.
should.
It's coming to you in the new year.
Are you going to tell people what's going on with UFOs? What was the
Yeah.
thing with the red lights that shot up there?
It's a
What
drone
was that?
swarm. It's
A
a drone
drone
swarm.
swarm.
Yeah.
Dollars in a black.
Let's just keep watching it. Put it on
Put it on
continuous
a loop.
loop
It's
for the
in the
next
background. It's
next
like background
hour.
noise.
Yeah,
That drone swarm right there?
yeah. It's a drone swarm.
How big are those drones? They look tiny.
They are tiny, and that's part of the.
That's real? That's not
gameplay.
like CGI?
No, that's real. That's
show
real.
that again,
There were
Jamie?
100 of those there. Oh, look at that!
that handsome
Get that look on his face. Yeah.
So that they just
those
rise up.
There's about 100 of those. They're all what they're doing at that point is they're programmed, they're computer controlled. They're all going to a designated altitude, and then they'll take off, and they can fly in whatever pattern you end up putting them into.
And these are weaponized drones? Are they like armed?
Those are not. Those are displaying
Surveillance?
the abilities. Yeah, they could be surveillance drones. They could, but you can weaponize them, and that's part of the concern in terms of where the battlefield could take us in the future is, and I mean, think about a drone swarm coming in on a high-level event, for instance, right? The ability to stop 100, 200 drones that are maneuvering. Now, the goal ultimately is to get those to think on their own, right? So you'll have like a queen bee out there controlling a whole pack of these things. And with artificial intelligence, they can make decisions on the fly, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not quite there yet, but they are to the point where you can program a swarm of these things to do a variety of tasks. And if you weaponize them, again, you can see where the problem lies in trying to stop that. And if you're responsible for security of a high-level target or individual or event, so it's a fascinating field, and the idea that, I mean, think about if you're in, pick a place. We're not in Afghanistan anymore, apparently. We talked about that, I think. But
Serbia.
if you're in Serbia, or you're in Kabul, or you're in Mogadishu, whatever, and you've got boots on the ground, but limited boots on the ground, the ability to throw out a drone swarm to do the recon of a facility, right? And depending on what those capabilities are, and you know, whether they've got, you know, FLIR or whatever they may be operating on to gather intelligence about what's ahead. Right? I mean, it gives you a tremendous advantage just from the recon, the surveillance point of view. Much less that, you know, I'm not even talking about the weaponized.
And these small, they're
capability.
very small. So what's the range on these things, and what powers them?
You know, that's where I look. What do I look like, a drone engineer? But
That seems like a question that I would ask if I was hosting a television show.
And I did.
And they didn't tell you?
No, they did. You can get, depending on the size of the drone, you can get distances that would be not extensive. Right now, you're not talking about you know, a drone produced by Northrop or Boeing that's going to be up in the air for 3 days. You're talking about something that's going down range, maybe a couple of miles, right? And is up and active for maybe on a battery charge, maybe anywhere to 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
And so these things
think
okay.
about that queen bee up there.
Right.
They can then go and get recharged, right? You don't have to come back to wherever
Then get
you're
recharged in
staging.
the air?
Yeah. So you can come back and you don't have to come back to the staging site. they can. So it's like a refueling tanker.
So what does it look like? This thing that the mothership that they
Yeah,
fly
it's basically
to?
a mothership. Yeah,
And they fly to and just stick onto it or something
yeah,
like that?
it's just a larger drone with more juice, more capability, and so it charges up, and it's. And again, the goal for all of this is to ultimately get to artificial intelligence capability, right? Whether they can get there anytime in the near future, is problematic.
But the big question is who gets there first, right?
Who gets there first, and that's the case with just about everything nowadays. Whether it's space. And worrying about, space has already been weaponized, right? The idea of space in the 60s was it's a community of nations and we're all going to live together. That's bullshit, right? We're already up there worried about how do you take out the satellites, or how do you approach a satellite covertly to maybe gather intel from a Chinese satellite that's up there, or the Chinese going after one of our satellites. Space is weaponized at this point. So yes, everything that goes on is, in a sense, based on the competition.
Now, I'm not letting you off the hook with UFOs, but I want to get to this while we're talking about China and artificial intelligence. Sagar from Breaking Points put up a video recently where he was talking about there was an AI company that sold 50% or 51% to China, and that China immediately repurposed the entire company and sort of kicked them out and renamed it. It's called something different. They have no recourse, and they now hold all of the artificial intelligence that this company had. This company thought they were going to work with them and make a bunch of money, and China just sort of took it over.
Yeah,
because they had like a 51% control of it, and now they're fucked because they changed the name of it. They're calling it Chinese technology. Sagar did a way better job of explaining it than I can. To see if you can find that.
But that's what's happened to a variety of companies that always seem to think that they can do business with the Chinese regime and come out on top. Or,
they get greedy, right?
Yeah.
They think of all these billions of dollars they're going to make from this deal, and they start thinking about ski chalets and driving a Ferrari, and then the next thing you know, they're
Yeah, no, it's true, and so whether it's a pharmaceutical company thinking they're going to go over and somehow protect their R&D, but build a facility over there.
Yeah.
And suddenly, or it's a software company that loses all their, their coding. It's always the same result.
It's amazing that they don't know that, or that they're willing to listen to what the Chinese are selling them, on the subject.
Right.
Like, yeah, we love you. We're going to work with you. And then, boom, they just change the name, completely repurpose all the technology, say it's Chinese technology.
Mm-hmm.
When Sagar was explaining it, it's a stunning story.
Well,
see if you can find. Have you found it yet?
And it happens. It happens a lot more often, and in some very pedestrian companies and sectors. But it's just emblematic of the Chinese understand and have understood for generations the lure of their market to the West. Right. Everybody's wanted to get into that market, right? Whether they're in insurance business or energy or pharmaceuticals or whatever it may be. Oh my God, I got to get into that market. And they've understood that. And so they manipulate that. They use that as leverage, and they never give a shit about sort of the end result where you get screwed, right? It doesn't matter to them, right? Because they win in the end. And just as with this case, they end up with the technology or with the
Taking a guess at
You
this.
found
Is
it?
this it?
Yes, this is it. Give me some volume and play this from the beginning. This is pretty fucking crazy.
All right, Sagar, what are you looking at?
Well, some of you may recall that in the video announcing Crystal and I were going independent, I mentioned one of the reasons we wanted to do so was so we didn't just have to chase views, but so we could focus on more substantive issues that belie the news cycle and our economy. I specifically pointed to semiconductors, as you all know, one of my personal obsessions, because they are the electronic backbone of the new economy. He who controls semiconductors controls the future. Not quite true yet, but it will be, in my opinion. And that's what I want to take you on a tour of today. One of the most brazen views yet into the corporate battles of the future, and a development which has immense implications for the future. They're calling it the semiconductor heist of the century. It's dramatic, I know. But once you learn the details, you'll be as outraged and as afraid as I am. So the company in question is known as ARM, or ARM. They are widely regarded as the most important semiconductor intellectual property firm. Their IP is in cars, it's in Amazon, cell phones, AI, everything. Pretty much everything. Intel, semi-analysis, they point towards clearly an important company, right? Now, as we have learned with the car shortage, the PS5 shortage, and more, the entire US economy can grind to a halt without these things. Now, prior to 2016, ARM was a British-controlled company, but corporations are gonna corporation. And in 2016, it was acquired by a Japanese firm, SoftBank. You probably know SoftBank from their storied roles in the drama behind WeWork and Uber, pouring Saudi cash into the startups to create the veneer of success, and eventually having the bottom fall out of both. Now, SoftBank's plan to make ARM even more money is the same thing that they did with Uber. They wanted them to enter the Chinese market. So in their infinite wisdom, they created a joint venture. It was called ARM Holdings, and they sold 51% to Chinese investors for $775 million. That, per semi-analysis, is a paltry sum, but it highlights what it means to do business in China. There's no such thing as independent business there. All Western businesses have to have Chinese partners. They are controlled at the behest of the Chinese state. And this is where things get really crazy. The Chinese branch of ARM, it holds much of ARM's intellectual property and designs for the next decade. Well, it's basically been stolen now by the Chinese with zero recourse. I'm really serious. The details are crazy, and they highlight exactly why letting our most valuable technology go to China in the first place and why business entanglements there are untenable in the long run. In 2020, ARM and a bunch of investors found that the head of their China operation was using his control of the company to attract investments to his other firm. So, by a vote of 7-1, at the board level, they decided to boot him. There's just one problem. That CEO's name is on the Chinese license. So despite the fact that the company wants him gone, Alan Wu, he's not going anywhere because he controls the license. So instead, under Chinese law, he's in control. He fired executives who didn't side with him. He now has security that has kept representatives from his parent company out of the building, and now he's just taking it over. So this culminated this week when ARM China just held an event where they declared their independence. They have a new name. Now they say they are China's largest CPU IP supplier. That is now independently operated as a Chinese-owned company. Now, critically, the technology that they preview and claim is their own, but really is just the IP and resources of its old company, is now being used to deploy billions of cameras across China to fulfill their dream of a fully integrated technological surveillance state. Social credit scores everywhere, everywhere you go is tracked, your travel is restricted, and the state knows everything about everyone, all the way down to the DNA level. So that's it. It's over. They control the company now. As semiconductor people are referring to it, it really is the heist of the century.
Okay.
But it's just
So we should just, first of all, shout out to Crystal and Saga from Breaking Points. It's one of the best fucking shows. Oh, you got cigars. Look at you. Come with gifts.
Yes, I know.
Literally one of the best shows that you can watch on the news and get an independent, real, objective perspective because they're honest and not controlled by anybody, and they cover stories like this that you're just not getting from anywhere else. And that, to me, is a terrifying story.
He's absolutely right. And although the thing that he showed there, which was the 1 in 5 North American companies, claim that they had IP stolen the past year, is so fucking low.
Is it really?
It's and it said like 7 out of 23 companies. I think it just said further down that point said 7 out of 23 companies said they'd had IP stolen over the past decade. Again, it's ridiculous. Here's the honest God's truth. If you take a company over there and you build facilities, you are giving up intellectual property. Maybe not all of it, but they're going to take what they can get their hands on. And so that number, when it says 1 out of 5, should probably be 5 out of 5. And it should be 23 out of 23. It's just, and we do this all the time. We underestimate the, where am I at here? We underestimate the numbers, and I just I don't know what it is about this lack of desire to call them out for what they do. And part of it is I get it if you're running a business and you've got facilities over there, you got personnel, you got investment over there. Okay, fine, I get it. I get why you're being somewhat cautious, but the reality is that until we start really being serious with them, and even then, I don't. You know what? I'm going to even stop right there because nothing's going to change their behavior. Right? The Chinese regime is what it is, and certainly under Xi, who has strengthened his position immensely over the past few years, they're not changing. So
how do they allow them to do business like this? Why is how is there no sort of oversight for such a critical aspect of technology? Right. These semiconductors, this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And for the Chinese to have control of this intellectual property that was developed over here simply because somebody underestimated their ability to commit fuckery. Like, how does that so simple? I mean, that seems like such a simple takeover that they did that.
Yeah, it's in part you get part there's bad advice, in part there's greed, right? I mean, it's oh my God, we get $770 million. There's no due diligence. There's poor due diligence. That's a big part of it.
I know that's a lot of money.
Yeah,
but it's not a lot of money. If you're talking about the whole world and control of the semiconductor market and the control that they're going to be able to have using their surveillance state and their social credit score and how that's going to impact China.
No, it's not, and you're absolutely right. It's not a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, people get excited. I'm going to make this deal, right? We're going to get this thing's going to get done. We're all going to, like you said, we're all going to get our new boats and our ski chalet, and it's going to be fantastic. I don't know. I mean, I've seen, I've got a company that does, one of the things we do is a lot of due diligence, and with China, I've seen a lot of bad due diligence done over the years. We'll get reports saying, well, this is what we got 2 years ago. What can we learn now about the company and its principles? And you have to really dig. When you're talking about looking at a potential investment or personnel there, whatever it may be, you got to just keep digging because the first batch of information you see is usually not correct, or it's obfuscated, or there's a second set of books somewhere or a third set of books. And, people are keen to get an investment done, right? Usually when you're talking about an investment, the overall goal is to make it happen. It's not to find a reason to shelve it, right?
Yeah.
So that part of it makes sense, I guess, in a way. I don't know.
It does make sense in a way, but do we have the way that China can do this and the way that China can take over a business simply by investing in it and pretending to be in partnership with them, but then everything they do is connected completely to the Chinese Communist Party, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're just doing business with the Chinese Communist Party. You're pretending that you're doing business with another corporation.
Yes, I mean, and some entities there are more state-owned than others, right?
Really?
Well,
it varies.
Yeah, but that's a nuanced variation, right? So you have levels, I guess you could say, of Chinese state interest in a particular business or a sector, right? And so, but ultimately, no, you never have complete control in a commercial sense. So at some point, the Chinese state is always going to have the ability to override any business decision that's being made. But you have to some degree, you have different levels of interest, again, based on what that interest, with particularly technology, AI, anything in engineering, that's going to be of more interest than sort of straight up manufacturing.
It seems to me, and this is a horrible thing to say, but there's an advantage that they have that's almost unstoppable in being connected to the government that we just simply don't have, and they can take advantage of the fact that people are greedy, right? And that people do look at this and go, hey, this is a great score for us here. We're going to make $500 and whatever $million. Let's get on board.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be, this is where it's going to sound fucked up, wouldn't it be advantageous for us to have a similar relationship with corporations when these corporations want to make deals with other countries? Again, I'm not advocating that the government get involved in corporations.
Right.
But what I'm saying is they're at a huge disadvantage if the Chinese Communist Party is always involved in deals and in all the corporations, and they're inexorably connected to these corporations. If we're not, and you let some knuckleheads who are thinking about getting that house in Tahoe, and they are thinking about getting a private jet, and they're thinking about all that money and not the ramifications on the global market, the ramifications on, the surveillance state, what that's going to how that's going to impact.
Right.
Like
right.
they're allowing this intellectual property to get taken away from them. It's
Yeah, you're talking about, is it a level playing field for countries coming in, companies coming in from other places, and the answer is honestly no. It's a completely unlevel playing field in China, and they don't really try to hide that fact, right? Unlike some places. I mean, look, you can go to other countries, France or wherever you may go, and you could argue that because the government views part of their responsibility as bolstering their commercial sector, right? And, okay, you can argue, the U.S., every country wants their commercial, industries to do well. But France or a variety of other countries around the globe, they have sort of a much more connected line between government, intel services, other parts of their government to promote and protect and help bolster their commercial businesses, right? So you get an Airbus situation like in France. And that is not necessarily uncommon, right? Here in the U.S., we have a firewall built up, right? So that the idea is we don't want to help a particular company because that would screw the sort of the idea of free markets, right? So you don't want to, if you gather intel that could benefit a company in a particular sector, well, you don't provide that to the company because that gives them an advantage over other businesses, and that's counter to the idea of a free market system.
Right.
So, and I know people listening, they go, it's bullshit. That's it. But it's the way it actually works, right? And it's very frustrating to some folks in the intel community and within the government that we always are at a disadvantage oftentimes in doing business, in pitching for business overseas, whether it's licensing, whether it's in the energy business, whatever it may be, and China being the primary example of a place where you walk in and you should understand immediately that you're at a disadvantage when you're dealing with the Chinese system, the Chinese regime. It's just the way they put it together, and their theft of intellectual property, their economic espionage, everything is designed to get them to the top of the food chain. That's all. That's their rightful place as far as the regime's concerned.
And everything.
And that's where they're going. I mean, honest to God, if we're not careful, if we're not, and you could argue the horses left the barn because
that's
this
what I'm
been
worried
going on
about.
and you're right to be worried because we're not talking about something. People imagine that because the previous administration under Trump, because they banged on about China, over the past 4 years, that somehow it's a new problem. And it's we've talked about this before. It's not. It's been going on for generations. So,
but it seemed like Trump was unusually cautious about it and highlighting it in a way that other administrations hadn't highlighted it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely. We talked about it more during the previous administration and in more realistic terms, in terms of the Chinese looking to hose us in a variety of markets and places and ways that they were doing it, and highlighting the idea of theft of intellectual property.
Yeah.
It was a much more straightforward conversation, and I think that's a very good thing. I'd like to think that the current administration under President Biden is going to continue with that. But again, do I think that sanctions, or do I think that a hard line is going to impact the regime enough to change their ways? And suddenly they're going to. I mean, like under President Obama, the idea was, well, we've talked with them, and they're not going to engage in theft of intellectual property. They're not going to engage in cyber shenanigans. Well, that didn't work out. Right. So I don't know that there's anything that's going to alter their view, because in their mind, it's a strategic decision. It's how they're getting to the top of the food chain.
And it seems like at this point in time, this is what scares me, that one of the only ways we may be able to keep up is to implement the same sort of strategy that they're doing. That's what scares me, that the government here gets intertwined with corporations, that a social credit score here gets employed, that we start doing some of the same things that they're doing in order to keep up.
Yeah.
Is that real?
I don't think – well, never say never, but at least for the time being, it really runs counter. Like you can only base it on what you've seen in your own experiences. And when I talk about this firewall that exists, between the government and the commercial sector in terms of promoting and helping and and advising and providing support, it exists, right? And I don't know that it's probably not going to change, regardless of what administration comes in. It just seems like it's ingrained in the system at this point, and it always means we're going to be at a disadvantage. It always means that we're, to some degree, in a variety of places around the world, operating on an unlevel playing field. But that's fine. We just got to work harder, right? I mean, that's just my opinion for what that's worth.
We got to work harder. What does that mean, though? That sounds like a platitude. That sounds like sort of.
It does sound like a platitude.
We got to work harder. Oh, okay,
yeah.
We'll fix that.
Well, it just means our
elbow grease.
Our technology has to be better. Our product has to be better. What we're selling has to be better. What our intelligence that we collect as a company, right? Like, I mean, look, companies spend a great. I know this because we work for a lot of companies, and
we meaning your security firm.
My firm, yeah, it's an intel and security operation, Portman Square Group. Look at that, I just promoted it. So Portman Square Group is a business that it's been doing this for a long time. I changed the name some time ago when I bought the company back from the previous investors, and we work with a lot of companies that have very good, very capable in-house resources to gather information related to risk and operational awareness on the ground, and maybe they're going to build a new facility somewhere. So they spend a lot of time trying to get that right and trying to understand. But I will say this also: when they've got a potential investment coming, right, or the opportunity to get into a market or whatever, the tendency again is always to make it happen, right? It's not a happy day when you present information that says this is a bad investment, you shouldn't do this, or this is shaky, or here's the problems you're gonna deal with. Because there's a lot of people who are invested in making something happen and growing the business or doing something,
right?
And so, occasionally, the companies that do really well overseas are the ones that approach it very pragmatically and say, if this looks bad, then we're going to pivot and we're going to find something else that looks better. And they don't ignore it. But a lot of companies tend to ignore sometimes good advice. And that gets them into a situation where then they got to, at the end of the day, reverse engineer and figure out how they got fucked. But, yeah.
The social credit score thing freaks me the fuck out, because I see vaccine passports and these type of deals as being a step towards this idea. The idea that you have to keep something, whether it's an app on your phone, that you need at all times. That freaks me out. And there was a discussion recently that was in Yahoo News, I believe I saw it, where they were talking about how your browsing history may affect your credit. That your credit is not just going to be what, have you paid your bills, how much money do you make, what is your your history in terms of loans. But look at this. Credit scores may soon be based on your web history. Is that a good thing? First of all, Ethan Rotberg, no, that's not a good thing. But let's read this, because it's kind of fucking crazy. Lenders could soon be using data from your browsing, search, and purchase history, your digital footprint, to create a more accurate credit score, according to the International Monetary Fund researchers. The working paper shows that combining your credit score and your digital footprint further improves loan default predictions. This scares the fuck out of me. And how exactly would this data be collected and used as part of your credit report? Survey says artificial intelligence and machine learning. The IMF isn't the only group to ponder such futuristic notions. A 2018 study from the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management also looked at lenders using personal online data in tandem with traditional data from credit bureaus. So what does your online behavior really say about you? Their findings show that digital footprint allows some unscorable customers to gain access to credit. See, there's the carrot. You can have access to credit, while customers with a low to medium credit score can either gain or lose access to credit depending upon their digital footprint. But I like how they said that. you could either gain or lose. Well, probably don't lose. Don't worry about the losing part.
Pay no attention. Pay no attention.
Yeah, depending on your digital footprint. So people are going to give up their fucking browsing history in hopes that they're going to get more money. Now, how many people are going to be willing to do that? What if they show definitively that if you give up your browsing history, you'll get X amount of points, more credit, period? People are just going to fucking do it.
Look, they've already done it, right? I mean...
but this way they'll do it openly. And I think this moves you one more step closer to a social credit score system, which I'm fucking terrified of.
Yeah, well, there's in a variety of areas. Look, fraud control. Take fraud control as a sort of a data aggregator. The amount of information that a company that's focused on assessing whether your transaction, right? You walk into a place, you're going to buy a pair of sneakers, right? You put your card in the machine. You know, it takes whatever, 4 seconds, whatever, for it to come up and say approved. In that 4 seconds, there is hundreds of points of information, being reviewed instantaneously about whether this is a potential fraud transaction or not. It's already happening, and they're looking at the algorithms that are used are all based on, in a sense, it's artificial intelligence to some degree, on machine learning of transactional awareness and of where this card was before over the past 6 months,
right,
and how many times it's been used, and what type of purchases it's been made, and So you think about all that information already out there, already being used, and it's a little bit scary from the sense of hacking and the ability to access millions and millions of people's information, because now it's all being held in a variety of silos. But then you also think about it being used, again, advancing it 1 or 2 steps and using it for this type of purpose, right? And I think people have gotten so blasé about their information, and in part it's because I love the fact that I don't have to use cash, and so
right.
I don't care. Or part of it is, I've got my details out there on so many different shopping sites, and it doesn't matter, right? So they're all so used to it, we've all been so conditioned to it that I don't know that a lot of people are going to be scared by it.
I don't think they're going to be scared by this at all.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, as long as it allows you to get access to more credit. Which, generally speaking, if they could just give you a little more credit and have access to your browsing history, you're going to do it. A lot of people are going to do it. Most people are going to do it. Like Mike, your home, you wanted to get credit. Looks like you can get this house if you let us look at your browser, or you can get that house if you don't.
Yeah.
People are going to do it. If they find out, you're going to get $200,000 in a loan, or $100,000 in a loan, depending upon whether or not you allow us to have access to your browsing history, how many people are going to say yes? They're probably going to try to clean up their fucking computer. They're going to be unsophisticated, take all the porn down. Like, they're going to go, Mike, you look at 8 hours of porn a day. This is kind of crazy.
Hey,
like,
don't knock a man's hobby. Don't knock a man's hobby.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like there's so many people that are going to be willing to give up that data. The same way, one of the things that I heard argued about Facebook, which is really fascinating, they were saying that Facebook treats you like you're a customer, but in fact you're the product, and you are providing them with data that they then sell. And there's a big difference between you being a customer and being a product, because you're treated like you're a customer, but you're actually a product.
Right.
And we've all just sort of accepted that, and we've given up this data. So we've given up this commodity that we didn't even know was valuable at the time. And now it's become literally one of the most valuable things in the world. You have these companies like Google and Facebook that have enormous amounts of money, entirely based on the fact that they have access to your data.
Well,
right?
and also you've got a lot of companies out there that, for whatever reason, can't get investment, can't get credit, can't get, and so, are they going to say, no, I'm not going to give up what they already assume they're doing anyway? For the most part, most people understand that they've given up a lot of information, in the commercial world. I know that the boogeyman is always like NSA. NSA is collecting information on you,
Right.
but that's not the point of this exercise. It's the commercial side of things because it is monetized and there is a revenue stream. That's where you're giving up all your information. But I think most companies, most individuals, I agree with you. If they think that there's a potential upside, they don't care because they're already doing it, or in their minds they're already doing it, or somehow they can write off the security risks or the concerns that might be there, or the privacy rights that frankly most people have assumed have long gone. So again, I think from my perspective, I've never. Because I spent so much time within the government, I've never been one who's worried about, big government collecting huge amounts of data on me, right? I mean, for the most part, they can't organize panic in a doomed submarine. So, and I think that it's the Googles and it's the Amazons and it's the others who have been busy for years and years, just figuring out how do we make money off of you.
Right. Well, that's what's interesting, right? With the argument has always been that private companies are better at a lot of things because there's profit involved.
Yeah.
Versus the government, and we're seeing this with like SpaceX, right? Like Elon Musk, because it's not funded by the government like NASA is. They're able to do incredible things, and they have kind of like free reign to figure out the right ways to do things, and they have enormous resources because of all the money involved.
Right. I think, having because I'm so shameless about this, but having now almost got to the finish of filming the second season for that Black Files Declassified, one of the things that we do is we do look a lot at the intersection of government and the commercial sector in terms of development of whether it's technologies for weapons development or whatever it may be. And there is a enormously healthy robust partnership between the government and a variety of sectors out there, in part because I think there is this understanding that you at some point you've got to take this idea and it's got to be germinated in the commercial side. That's where it's really going to come to fruition, right? You got in certain parts of like DARPA and some parts of the government, you've got incredibly smart people. But ultimately, you got to get it into the commercial side to get it developed. It's like that hypersonic weapon that was built by Raytheon, right? And DARPA came out with the announcement, and DARPA's heavily involved. But it's the Raytheon engineers, and they're not doing it, because they're mostly worried about who's going to be at the top of the food chain. They're doing it because there's a revenue stream that they understand is very, very important for their next 10 or 20 years of growth. And so they want those contracts, and so they're going to do every fucking thing possible to be successful at it. So I don't know where I was going with that.
Which brings me back to UFOs.
Oh, I knew we were going back to UFOs.
When you see all of these announcements, I mean, I'm sure you know more than I do, and I'm not asking you to say things you're not supposed to say. But when you see these announcements, like when the Pentagon talks openly about UFOs, when you see it in the New York Times, that 2017 article where they're talking to people, like highly respected people like Commander David Fravor and all these people that have had these encounters with unexplainable technology. When you see this being discussed, do you think that some of this is just obfuscating? Some of this is just like covering up for the fact that we have some super advanced technology that we're not letting be public? And they're you can say, oh, well, we don't even know what's going on. This could be UFOs. Like, I don't believe, whenever I see like these public announcements about technology that we don't understand, that is coming from alien worlds, that to me, I always go, why would they tell us that? What is the reason for all of this transparency all of a sudden? Like, and how much of this is bullshit? How much of this is just covering up that there's some insane technology that they have a handle on? And this brings me to this. What is that? Was it a CIA document, the UFO document? Do you know what I'm discussing, Jamie? Where they were talking about the technology and there was some sort of a patent on the same type of technology that is potentially being utilized by these unexplainable crafts, where they're using some sort of a magnetic-based propulsion system. What is behind the U.S. Navy's UFO fusion energy patent? This is what it is. So it's, you motherfuckers with their pop-ups.
Blocked.
Sons of bitches. So if you scroll down, so there's some sort of a patent.
Yeah, PICE.
Yeah. You know what that is? So tell me. Plasma-controlled fusion device. They filed a patent for this plasma-controlled fusion device in 2019, and it says it's either a giant breakthrough or mad science. According to the patent application, the miniature device could contain and sustain fusion reactions capable of generating power in the gigawatt, 1 billion watts, to terawatt, 1 trillion watts range or more. A large coal plant or a mid-sized nuclear power reactor, by comparison, produces energy in the 1 to 2 gigawatt range, which is insane. So you're talking about something that can produce the amount of power that a fucking coal plant or a mid-sized nuclear power reactor can make.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing about this is, and we actually featured this in a episode of Black Files Declassified, second season coming in the new year. Thank you very much. And Dr. Pice, the government did investigate his ideas, his patents. From what we've seen of the paperwork that's been released and declassified, you could draw the conclusion, although it's not complete, that there was nothing to it after they examined his theories, his ideas about how to generate this level of energy in a small contained device. And they came out and said, we don't think there's anything there. It appears as if at that point, funding for research into what he had proposed stopped. But I would say...
I like that word, but.
Yeah, but one thing that we seem to be learning is that it's a rare day when funding is allocated to something and then stopped, right? Usually that money then is shifted, or the program morphs, or the idea or the theory or the testing moves into some other area. So what we're looking at now is, did they come up and say, okay, we don't think this works, or did they essentially wrap that up because it became known, and then morph it into a different, essentially black file or black budget or whatever you want to call it, and continue looking into this type of energy production, right? But if you follow the trail of available paperwork and the people that we've talked to, you get to a point where they say, nah, there was nothing there, and so we stopped researching, we stopped funding that research. My experience has always been that nobody then says, okay, you can have your money back, right?
Right.
Or they're looking to, like with some of our past stealth aircraft, they just shut it down, but they move the whole thing into something completely different, right? So that it's now classified and hidden.
Right.
Look, we
Can I just show you the language?
Yeah.
Go to that second tab that you opened up, please, Jamie, on that subject. Look at the language that they use at the top of this. Space-time modification weapon. What the fuck does that mean? Space-time modification? This is...
See that if you scroll back to the top, Navy spent 3 years and considerable sums of money testing the PACE effect, which, yes, we've proven, and may have transferred the program to another agency. That's the part,
You
right?
just said it.
There you
Nailed
go. Look
it.
at that. Anyway.
And they're saying that this is no bigger than the size of an SUV that could potentially have the same amount of power as a nuclear reactor, which is just fucking insane.
Because a lot of the sightings, one of the things about some of the more interesting sightings over the past, particularly over military facilities or by, whether it's Fravor or other military aviators, is again, the lack of propulsion, right?
Yes.
Well, so we didn't see anything. We got no heat signature. Or we saw no evidence of engines. There was nothing to indicate how this thing would be moving. And so that becomes a big part of the question. But to go back to your original question, it is one of the most fascinating parts about this right now is why the Pentagon decided to sort of set the table with opening up about ATIP as an example, right? And saying, okay, we're gonna talk about this. Look, they had the advanced aerospace weapons systems application programs, right, which kind of preceded ATIP. And the idea, I think, that the military, at some point recently, they decided it's better for us to talk about this in a sort of a operationally logical fashion. So I think they approached it from saying, well, look, of course we have an office like ATIP, right? Lou Elizondo and a bunch of others have, already been talking about it. So it came out, and I think the military thought probably the best way for us to explain it is just simply by saying, well, of course we're going to be looking at unidentified or aerial phenomena that we can't explain. That's a national security issue, and it is. It makes sense, right? So you have an office that would go out there, and if you spot something, particularly if it's near a sensitive facility, then yeah, of course you want to know what the fuck it is, right? So you get a sighting, and is it a way for them to set the table so that it just kind of shuts everybody up and they go, okay, I get it, thank you for talking to us about it, right? Or is it a way for them to say, here's a logical explanation, now we don't have to talk about our the technologies that we've been developing or where that others have been developing. I don't know, but I think it makes sense. I'm impressed that the Pentagon would take this route, but I'm curious as to how far they'll go. So what we're hoping to do is sit down with them and say, okay, why exactly? Because no one's really asked them, why are you talking about this now? Right. And if they have asked them, I suspect the answer will simply be, well, we're just explaining why ATIP existed.
Now, something like this, let's assume that this program is legitimate. It's a big assumption. Let's just assume for the sake of this conversation. Mm-hmm. How many people are involved? How many people know about the capabilities of this particular weapon / propulsion system that they're working on right now?
Yeah, well, they're all signed, to
death warrants.
Death warrants.
Keep your fucking mouth shut, bitch.
So we'll never know. But typically any of these programs is pretty close hold. Whether it's coming out of the Skunk Works or whether it's wherever it may be, you're not talking about a lot of people, but it's an engineering exercise. So you're talking about a range of backgrounds and experiences and people, and it's I guess if we had two things. If we were holding, it's going to sound strange, but if we were holding aliens at Area 51 as an example, I firmly believe there's no way we could have kept that secret for any period of time, right?
Why do you say that?
Well, because it's human nature. It's the.
Well, that's Bob Lazar then.
Yeah,
right? Because he didn't keep it secret.
I know. It's just, but I think also. In a shorter period of time, I mean, I'm talking going back, decades and decades, right? So ever since Area 51 became, ground zero for some of the thoughts and ideas about, aliens. But in recent terms, if you're talking about the past handful of years and you're developing new technologies, new propulsion system, whatever it may be, do I think that the government can keep that secret over a relatively short period of time? Yes, right. So. I don't know where I'm going with that other than I suspect that what's happened is that we
Here it goes. It says the document also shows that a team of at least 10 technicians and engineers were assigned to design and test an experimental demonstrator, and that testing was being conducted as recently as September of 2019. So this is my question. Yeah. When you have these unexplained things like what Commander David Fravor sees off the coast of San Diego, what is the potential that is the United States government testing some of this insane technology that they're trying to keep under wraps, and then when they release some sort of a statement like this, what would be the purpose of even releasing the statement?
Well, I think there were so many questions, and that it had gotten out there and had been in the press, and there had been enough stories about it that I think, in part, I don't want to say damage control, but I think they were just trying to get ahead of it a little bit.
So they say, we tried, but it wasn't successful, so we abandoned the program. Sorry, it's over.
Right.
But then this article highlights exactly what you said, that they probably moved it to another agency, which means it's probably continuing this cycle of development.
Look, there is no way they stop researching or working in a sort of a feverish pace to develop this type of technology, this ability to, and
because there's a potential for it.
Because there's a potential for it, and because it's so important, right? Because, and again, it comes back to the idea of competition, right? We know the Russians and the Chinese are doing everything they can, right, to develop new propulsion systems, new material science issues related to hypersonics, and can you get a manned hypersonic aircraft? Not, probably not in our lifetime, frankly, because of the speed we're talking about and the impact on the materials that we've got. But there's no way that we're not, just because they shelve one file, one research project, doesn't mean they're not moving into something else, or they're not taking an aspect of it and saying, okay, this could work. And so, yes, could what Fravor have seen been something that we were testing and developing? Part of me says, well, look, if that's the case, they wouldn't have been doing sorties, in close enough. They would have found a more remote location,
unless they wanted it to be discovered.
Yeah, and there is some of that's out there in terms of what do we release, to the outside world, meaning, countries that are not aligned with our interests. And so there's something to that gets them worried. That gets the Chinese thinking, well, what exactly do they have, right? So, yeah, I just think that it's the Fravor thing. We've talked about it before. We keep coming back, and it is really, one of the few sightings that you look at and you go, I don't know, this thing. There's not an explanation for it yet. There's not you can't write it off, right? And
I mean, it was above 60,000 feet above sea level, and it got down to 50 feet in less than a second.
Yeah, and he's just such and he wasn't the only one. He's not the only one that had eyes on target.
Right.
So it's such a credible sighting that it does create. And if that's the case, then look, you can't. Anybody who says absolutely, there's not phenomena out there that we can't explain. I don't understand how you hold that point of view. Right. We don't know. Right.
Not only that, if it's an individual occurrence, if it's one thing that occurs in one place, how do you know whether or not this happened? Just because it's not repeating all over the country, like, the sighting of bald eagles or something. Just because it's not something that you can go out and absolutely prove to be true. Like when something happens, a unique occurrence, it's very difficult to say whether a unique occurrence actually took place.
Well, we know
unless there's real evidence, and there's video of this fucking thing.
Yeah, and we know from other materials from OSAP, and also from the successor operation, the ATIP office within the Pentagon, and they're current. And again, that's the point. They talk about, well, ATIP. We stopped that a few years back. Really, do you think that they've stopped investigating aerial phenomena that they can't explain right off the bat? I mean, it's ridiculous to think that. So there's an element somewhere under a different acronym that's doing the same thing. And so what have they seen? There's been multiple sightings. And again, one of the more interesting things about the sightings is that they're over a number of times over sensitive facilities, sensitive installations. And so that leads you to wonder, okay, are they, is that because they're home based there, whatever the technology is, whatever platform we're testing, whatever it may be, or is that because it's from a different nation that's out there trying to figure out, or what is it, right?
Right. Or if you want to get crazy, is it from another planet?
Is it from another planet, right? And so, they although they got to, if they're coming out here and they're looking, they got to be thinking, oh, fuck this, we'll just keep moving on. We can't. There's except for entertainment value, there's nothing to see here.
Maybe they're worried that we're going to do something really fucked up. I mean, when you have countries that have so many nuclear weapons that we could kill everyone on the planet multiple times over and literally turn this whole thing into a glowing ball, maybe if I was from another planet, I'd be like, let's just keep a close eye on these crazy fucks.
Yeah.
Let's keep a close eye. We have basically these creatures that are going from tribal warfare to nuclear technology to fusion reactors that are the size of an SUV, capable of producing gigawatts.
Yeah. In short order.
Yeah.
One of my favorite little, I don't know what you call it, a little tidbit of information is you think about the Wright brothers.
Yeah.
And then you think about, what 50 years later, we're landing on the moon.
It's pretty crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. If you think about that condensed period of time, going from, I think we can get this thing made out of paper and twigs to fly, and then we're landing on the fucking moon.
And they go even crazier than that.
Yeah.
The technology involved in that is nothing compared to this little thing that you've got sitting in front of you that sits in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So they went from a whole room full of gigantic supercomputers in the 1960s to something that's way more powerful that just sits in your pocket, that now the new one has a terabyte of storage.
Yeah. Yeah, that my 10-year-old boy Muggsy, picks up, and it's like a part of his body, right? There's no fear of technology, right? It's completely intuitive,
and they know how to change things. And no, I'll show you, Dad.
Yeah,
and they're in the settings, and
oh my God, yeah, my kids, all three of them, Scooter, Sluggo, and Muggsy, they understand. It didn't take them very long to understand that from a technology point of view, they're far advanced compared to me, right?
Yeah, they're locked into it, right?
Yeah,
it's like learning a language.
Yeah.
Like they say it's the best time. When you're a kid, you learn a language. You can learn a second language very easily. When you're old like us, it's a grind. By the way, this phenomenal cigars.
It's very good, right?
Very
and
good.
that other one's a Partaga Series D4, which is just outstanding.
Did you have to go to Cuba to get these?
I might have.
Can I confirm or deny?
I can't either one. Yeah. So anyway, but
this whole subject, to me, it's like I could buy it on surface level, which I love to do, and say, "Oh my God, the government's coming clear because they want us to know because they can't stop this, and this is such a big issue." But one of the more confusing things about it, and one thing that kind of confirmed my suspicions about this time that we're living in, where there's this overwhelming amount of information that something just gets lost in the news cycle, and then a new thing comes out, and you just forget because there's so much we can't keep up. That they release this information and no one seems to give a shit. I mean, obviously it came out in the middle of the pandemic, so everybody's kind of fucked anyway. But it seems to me that they would not have any real motivation to tell us the truth about this stuff. So when they're talking about this stuff, I'm always wondering if they're preparing us for the implementation of some technology that they've been developing that they can now say they don't have control over, and they could use it to their advantage. The fact that we might be willing to believe that it is from another world or another dimension because they've already said, well, there are real things that are out there that we can't explain.
Yeah. I mean, I think one part of this is just the pace of development. We talked about it a little bit just now, but the pace of development within weapons technology and artificial intelligence, right? That's a whole separate issue in terms of like you said before, right? If aliens fly by and they look and they go, well, these guys are pretty fucked up and they're capable of blowing this whole planet up here short order. If you layer on top of that our old traditional nuclear systems, I don't know where I'm going with this, and then you put onto that sort of the ability to remove the human from the equation, right? So that your defense systems aren't, for whatever reason, aren't attached to a human, right? That, what is that? And the Soviets did it, right, with that old dead hand project that they had. And the idea now, the U.S. says, now we're never going to go that route. We're never going to, make our security systems based on no human involvement. But again, not sure where I was going with that, other than I find it fascinating that we seem to think that's a remote possibility, and the idea that technology might outpace our ability to control it, is interesting. Not saying that robots are going to take over.
But artificial intelligence could one day become sentient. I mean, that's the real concern that people like Elon have.
Yeah.
That one day we're going to flip the switch on something that we can't turn back.
Yeah, there's a number of people that feel that way. There's another people on the other side of it that say, no, it's never going to happen.
I don't buy those people at all.
Yeah, I mean, I because again, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Well,
so you don't know where this is going.
No one saw this coming. No one saw this phone.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that freaks me the most out is that no one saw the internet coming. Even in science fiction, like if you go back to like the old Star Trek episodes, and Captain Kirk, they thought they were going to have a walkie-talkie. Kirk out, it's like there's so many things that you can't predict in terms of the
old flip communicator thing. Yeah,
no screen, no FaceTime.
Yeah.
There's so many things you can't predict when it comes to innovation and technology, and the expansion of these ideas that branch off into these sort of unpredictable ways. when a new piece of technology, whether it's this space-time manipulation thing that they're talking about, or anything that gets designed that no one saw coming and is a complete game changer, like the internet has been. If that happens with artificial intelligence, and they can one day develop something ex machina like, or even weirder, something that's like literally controlling society, like artificial intelligence.
Well, and look, again, if you think about the intersection of how these things develop, by the way, I think I don't know who created the Dick Tracy cartoon, but they had the old wristwatch. That
now we have those.
See people on there.
People thought that was crazy?
Yeah.
Remember?
I thought I was going to get
You're
a personal
talking to your
jetpack,
phone.
right?
Yeah.
I was supposed to get my fucking personal jetpack.
Where's the jetpacks?
Pissing me off. But
they still haven't figured that out.
But if you think about you put artificial intelligence in there, and then going to something like this hypersonic weapons development, where you've reduced the reaction time almost down to zero. Right, and that's one of those. So you kind of got these things. You got people say, "Well, never take the human out of it," and then you've got this worry about, but we're reducing the reaction time beyond the point where humans can react. So maybe we've got to have this artificial intelligence capability to drive most of the reaction time. So you can see how this whole thing could compress into a real, shit show.
Especially if you're dealing with companies that have been compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, which we know that was the deal with Huawei, which we've talked about many times before.
Right.
About they had installed these sort of third-party systems where third-party access was available to like routers and a lot of their technology, and it's one of the reasons why they stopped allowing Huawei to sell their phones in the United States.
Right. I mean, it's again, you're putting a backdoor access point into whatever it is that you're selling.
So if that happens with artificial intelligence that actually is controlling our defense systems, and then there's hypersonic weapons that these artificial intelligence programs are supposed to be able to detect, but they've been compromised because we bought Chinese technology.
Right. I mean, you've dropped the reaction time down to almost nothing. It's unpredictable. So now you're thinking, okay, well, a human can't look at the data on this incoming object and process it fast enough. So we got to get the machines in there, and then it's a short step. I don't want to who knows where it's going, but I'm just thinking it's silly to say that it's not a problem.
Right.
So,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Who knows where it's going, but it is silly to say that if you just think about where this all goes as it expands, as this technology expands, it doesn't necessarily go to a place where it's controllable. And if we decide that the only way to have this stuff really truly be competitive with the rest of the world is to give it a certain amount of autonomy and allow it to make decisions, well, then we're really fucked. I mean, that's what bothers me. This bothers me.
It's like, start drinking.
The only way I see this getting out is if, and this scares me maybe even more, is that we integrate with technology. And I kind of think that's where we're going. And when Elon starts talking about, he's recently saying that he's going to stream music in your head. Have you seen that, Jamie? He's saying that through Neuralink, you're going to be able to stream music into your head. So, like, you'll be able to be playing music just like you'd have AirPods on, but no one will know. And you're sitting there at work just bebopping along. And
I don't. To me, that doesn't seem like a strange thought, right? Again, because of the pace of everything's exponential, at the pace of tech development, and so again, it's what do I know? I'm not a rocket scientist.
Do you pay attention to security when it comes to like your phones and like Pegasus and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Do you scan your phones?
We do. I try to, and I'll tell you why. It's not because I'm engaged in national security issues anymore. It's in part my concern over security is because I got kids, right? And so I'm just worried about it as a parent, and so part of the driver for why I'm always kind of focused on data protection or protecting yourself or your identity, whatever it may be. It's just because it's a parent, right? I mean, so to me that makes sense. From a business perspective, you would be surprised at how lax a lot of systems are, whether it's in the commercial side or government. I mean, shit. Look, it wasn't that long ago, right, that we had what was it? 4 years ago, that we had the release of on the WikiLeaks of Vault 7, right? All the hacking tools that got, pulled out from the CIA, right, and released. Some of them released on WikiLeaks. Which is a whole different story.
Yeah, we were going to talk
about that.
About how there may have been conversations with intelligence agencies and Trump, allegedly. This is a problem. When I see that released like that, those kind of, I'm like, who's benefiting from releasing this that they were thinking about whacking Julian Assange? Mm. And do you buy into that? What do you think?
Yeah, I think elements of the story. We're talking about a story that was on, I think Yahoo News actually broke it, but it's only been in the past day and a half or 2 days or whatever. That the idea was that during the previous administration, or the Trump administration, particularly because Mike Pompeo, who at this particular point in time was the CIA director, was so incensed over WikiLeaks releasing some of the Vault 7 information about CIA hacking. So, and a lot of other people in the agency were also likewise very upset about it. But according to the story anyway, there was talk within the Trump administration over, can we kidnap Assange, who, I mean, at the time he'd been in the Ecuadorian embassy, taking refuge there in London for 5 years.
And he was only on like the second floor, right? When you go to that balcony, you're like, Jesus Christ, he's right there.
There he is. Yeah,
you can just get a tall guy to grab him.
Yeah, a really tall guy. Yeah, and we don't hire a lot of them because they stand out at the agency. But so he's there, and the idea was that there was conversations, discussions, and some planning scenarios developed about how can we kidnap Assange, and then according to the story, there's also some talk about, well, could we assassinate him? I mean, where could this thing go? If anybody had walked in, if I had been in a position of responsibility at the agency, and someone had walked in and said, yeah, we need to draw up some scenarios for the White House over how we can either kidnap or assassinate Assange, I'd say, get the fuck out of my office, right? Go get back to work, dude.
I would like to think that you would say that.
I would have said that. I mean, you can't. It's an insane story. I realize that it doesn't condone the because where I stand on people like Manning or Snowden. I think it's a treasonous act. I think I get why people are very supportive of them for releasing for stealing the information and releasing it. I get that, but I'm not on that side. But at the same time, that doesn't give you justification to say you're going to go into a sovereign nation's embassy in another sovereign nation in the UK and render an Australian citizen. I mean, it's insane.
Can I challenge you on the Snowden thing?
Yeah.
Because if Snowden released something that showed that the NSA was involved in something that's unconstitutional and completely illegal, doesn't he have a certain amount of responsibility as a patriot to release that information to the general public and allow them to see that the government, which is really just a bunch of people, is doing something that is completely illegal and monitoring people in a way that they had no idea was taking place, meaning that all of their phone calls, all of their emails, everything was being stored, and it could potentially be leveraged against them if they were inconvenient.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say no. I get that. I understand it. I can't, from my position, get myself there to say that it was a patriotic act. What I think would have been the right approach was for him to go. And I know that people say, it couldn't have happened. I think releasing that information within the intel committees, figuring out a way to get that information through a whistleblower chain, pushing it and doing everything possible to do that, and getting it out, is that important? Yes, I get that. But I can't again, we have to base on our experiences. And based on what I've done over there, I can't get myself to the point of saying what he did was a patriotic act. But I understand the point of view entirely. And in a theoretical sense, yes, I get it. I just can't get myself there.
I understand what you're saying because of your position and that you worked for the agency for so long. But you're not dealing with the CIA at this point, right? You're dealing with the NSA.
I know.
It's a different organization, but they were doing something that is completely illegal. Like the United States.
Oh, you get no argument from me on that.
Right.
Yeah,
so how does one stop that from happening or make the public aware? Because I don't know how much has changed because they WikiLeaks and Assange, he's still like being held for something that I can't even understand why he's being held.
Yeah,
right.
He's in a London prison.
Right, but it doesn't make sense. Like the original charge was like surprise sex or some kind of sexual thing where he was.
That was dropped. I think that was dropped. He's being held based on like a 2012 warrant in the UK, and I think that. And this is again, this is part of the problem. I mean, this story that came out about Pompeo pushing for options in terms of could we kidnap him, could we whatever. Look, the Department of Justice, U.S. Department of Justice, has been working on trying to figure out how do we get him extradited back to the States.
But here's the question: why?
States.
Like, hasn't the damage been done? Like, hasn't he really? Is it to punish anybody else that might consider being a whistleblower in the future and to send a message? Like, why would they want to? If the guy has already essentially released all those documents, why would they be so concerned with what he has to say now?
Well. Yeah, there were a couple of aspects of where the U.S. government was going after him. One was that he was actually working to help. Remember Manning, now Chelsea Manning,
right?
To facilitate. So he wasn't just a receptacle. It wasn't just receiving documents, but was helping Manning to try to facilitate the theft of classified material.
So is that espionage?
Yeah. And then they also layered on some Espionage Act. For actually publishing classified information. That's, I think, probably a weaker position than actually trying to work with someone to facilitate the theft of intellectual property. That's not a journalistic role right there. But publishing, you could argue, okay, that's a journalistic role.
So which person would have done the more egregious crime in terms of the position of the intelligence agencies? Would it be Manning or would it be Assange? Because Assange is still locked up. Manning is now free.
Yeah, I know. That's been this problem. This whole discussion, whether you're talking about Manning, Assange, Snowden, throw it all into this bucket, and it's very emotive. I'm conflicted in the sense that on the Snowden issue, I agree again. Yeah, that what NSA was doing, it needed to be brought to light. Yeah, it needed to be brought to light, but I just think it should have been brought in a different fashion.
But the thing is, there's no repercussions.
Was theft of documents. What Assange did, the way that the agency was viewing Assange in a sense was that he was not facilitating, but being like an arm of or being used by. To some degree, as an example, Russian intel services to do harm to the U.S. You could argue but the story itself is insane. And again, I go back to the same thing. It makes no sense. How logical, reasonable people could sit around. I get it that they were pissed off about, in the aftermath of the Vault 7 information disclosures and the embarrassment that caused and just the trouble that it caused and the release of that sensitive information. But that doesn't then mean you should sit and have operational meetings about kidnapping him. Right across the water, the Department of Justice is busy trying to do their thing. And if they can do their thing legally, great. Right? If they can't, then okay. Then they couldn't.
Do you think they're punishing him? Do you think by continuing to imprison him and by not releasing him and by not dropping this case and even if this discussion was true about killing him,
right?
Like is it to send a message to other people?
Yeah, I think that was the idea. Was they at some point again? You go. Part of this, I think, needs to be explored further. Hopefully, other outlets will pick up the Yahoo News story. I think it deserves more investigation. But, part of it is at a certain point, moving from the Obama administration to the Trump, because you have to remember all the various sort of parts here. You had the Democratic email releases, right, in 2016, and that was viewed as a Russian operation. And WikiLeaks was
rightly
in
so
concert.
or no? Do you think that was, in fact,
Sure,
coordinated?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we go back to, Yuri's comments about, active measures and
Right.
sure.
Do you think that this was in coordination with Trump? Do you think that Trump had some sort of direct, or was it more advantageous for the Russians to have Trump in the position as president? Like, why do you think they would work with WikiLeaks to release the Clinton emails?
Because it caused us trouble. It caused chaos. It
caused
further distrust in the system. Caused a further splintering of our population.
So it was very effective if you think about
absolutely
how
effective,
much we've been divided since 2016.
Yeah, and it's all. And again, we go. Again, when you showed that great clip of Yuri talking about this, and you're realizing it was 40 years ago. They're still doing it, and they're still finding it to be successful. And they're finding the technology that exists out there, these phones that we just talked about, and the social media outlets. They're finding all of that to help. I mean, that's a great thing. In the old days, if you wanted to do a covert action campaign, you had to hire some journalists, right? You had to develop a network of newspaper journalists, right? Find people that could plant articles that you had, skewed a certain way to influence the population in that country, so that they would say, oh yeah, you know what, the dictator does suck, but you had to cobble together, it was a heavy lift.
Right.
And now it's fucking so much easier, right? Because you got all these social media outlets, you can do it, sitting in Moscow, and you can influence millions of people, and that was unheard of even 25 years ago.
And
years ago.
Find them sometimes, man. I'm like, I'll sometimes find a story, and then I'll see a really aggressive or odd take, and then I'll go to that person's Twitter page, and I'll see, what is this?
Yeah.
And you look at it, it's like, I don't think this is a real person. You go, and they're just reposting all these stories about either the Republicans or the Democrats, with occasional commentary attached to that, and very aggressive viewpoints. But the human being behind it just seems non-existent. And then you see the amount of followers they have. It's usually very minimal. And there's usually some sort of a generic photo that identifies them in their Twitter profile. And you're like, wow, knowing what I know about the Internet Research Agency, and knowing that there's probably multiple different similar organizations in a lot of these other countries that oppose us. Like, how many of these fucking things are out there? Because they know that there's hundreds of thousands of fake accounts that are being utilized by foreign governments.
It's nothing more than a marketing campaign. I want the population to drink more Pepsi, right? I'm going to figure out how to make that happen. What drives that sector? What drives the demographics that I'm interested in? It's no different than trying to figure out, how to increase your viewership of a show or whatever it may be. And when you put the state-sponsored resources behind it, it's an immensely powerful thing.
Yeah.
And again, the technology has made it so much easier. So the idea that we're being manipulated, I mean, it happens in a variety of different ways. People are going to say, well, I don't care about the Russians. I care about, Amazon trying to manipulate me or whatever. Yeah, and they're doing it too. Right? I mean, how many times you search for something? I search for something on my phone, and then I spend 2 days getting, unsolicited pop-ups saying, oh, by the way, here's, we got another, MGB for sale over here.
Right.
I took delivery finally of that.
Yeah?
Back in 1965 MGB
Is that
Roadster.
the one? Does that have a wooden frame?
No. No,
some of them did, right? The older ones?
Oh, the old ones, yeah. But this one's 65.
My uncle used to have one with a wooden frame.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God, it was.
Yeah, that'd be a tough ride. But so these pop-up ads show up, and it's just like there you go.
Yeah.
And so
they
I think
know what you're looking for.
They know what you're looking for. But the idea that the Russians would look at our society today and go, yeah. It's so easy to divide and conquer, and that's what they're doing. Whether they're playing black against white, they're playing, rich against poor, it doesn't matter what the subject is. They know it doesn't take much to increase that chaos. And ultimately, to some degree, that's all they want to do. And we got lost in the idea that it was because they wanted Trump to win, or they wanted, Clinton to win, or they wanted whatever. That's not their point.
Their point is to create chaos. To create dissent, and to make sure that we are even further divided.
Right, and bring down the system eventually. I know that sounds old school and very Cold War-ish, but it's still there. Yeah.
Well, if you look at the result, it seems like they're being very effective.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never been more
Absolutely.
divided.
Yeah.
Do you ever have any sort of suspicions at all that potentially COVID-19 could have been purposely released? Because I mean, you have to take it into consideration, right?
You do. You have to. It's like everything else. It's like planning for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Right. You got to figure out what's the worst case scenario, and you got to create.
Yeah,
something
I'm not saying that it happened, but it's
right.
one of those things where you got to go, okay, this is something that you can't completely ignore the possibility of it. A government, like one of the things we covered on my sci-fi show way back in the day was this idea of a bioweapon, about using some sort of a manipulated virus that gets out into the general population and wreaks havoc. Obviously, this one was worldwide, but it's not like it was targeted in one specific area. But in getting something that does go worldwide, look at the amount, the authoritarian response just in Australia. Australia has turned into a fucking prison colony. And then here's one where the Second Amendment advocates step up and say, hey, this is why we have the Second Amendment. Like, you could always say that the Second Amendment is supposed to apply to protection of yourself and a well-armed militia. It has nothing to do with, some guy being able to have 150 fucking ARs in his bedroom, and this is crazy, and it's overreach, or it's being abused rather. But Australia has no guns. The general population, there's a few people that have like rifles for hunting, but there's nothing like we have here in America, and they are being overrun. Cops they're pulling people over for simply being outside their homes, and they're throwing them to the ground like thugs. You're seeing these protests where they're literally pepper spraying old ladies in the face. It's crazy how much they've been divided, and what scares the shit out of me is I've got to think that any foreign entity, any foreign government that sees what's possible in Australia would like to see that happen in America.
Well, yeah.
Nothing's more divisive. Nothing divides a population more than seeing this place that was like always a great place to visit. Right. People were so friendly, and now it's a fucking police state. Like, how does this deteriorate so quickly?
I spent part of my childhood there. I didn't come to the States till my last year of high school, right? So, and I was in Australia. And
what's it like for you watching?
I'm stunned by their reaction, first of all, to imposing the regulations, the requirements, the protocols that they've got in place, and I'm also kind of stunned at the Australian population's willingness to, allow it to happen in a sense.
They're rejecting it now.
Yeah, it took a while though. It took a while because this has been going on for a while. Look, Melbourne's the most locked down city in the world,
which is crazy, and the amount of deaths they've had is so minimal. Yeah, it's so small. It's like Florida on a weekend for the entire pandemic. I'm not kidding.
No, it's true.
It really is like that.
Yeah. So I'm shocked by the way that it's taken place. And I never would have picked Australia as a place where they would have tried enacting this, but
it's a bit of a proving ground, though, isn't it?
It seems that way. Although you could argue a former penal colony, maybe it's reverting the type. So, but I think that look, I have no doubt in my mind that this thing originated in the lab. No doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, we're talking about that as the likely scenario back in January of 2020, right? And then people started, say, it's conspiracy. And they said it because it was Trump. Right. And that's, which is insane. But so much of what's happened over the past few years has been insane because it's just automatically, if it emanated from the previous administration, it was bullshit, whether it was or not, right? Some of it was bullshit, but whether it was or not, it didn't matter. And so facts didn't matter. But I have no doubt that emanated. Do I think it was deliberate? No. Do I think the Wuhan lab had dealings with the Chinese PLA with the military? Absolutely. Were they, conducting some research on the military's behalf? I have no doubt about that either. But do I think that it was designed and released deliberately? No, I probably draw the line at that point. But look, we don't know what we don't know because the Chinese are being so fucking non-transparent about this, and that's the problem. We just had that last intel assessment came out in late August of this year, and I've never seen anything as an assessment that tells you less. right? But at least they're honest because they come out and go, well, it's still inconclusive as to whether it originated in the lab because the Chinese won't cooperate, right? And our intel is so poor there, we just don't have the sources. And you're talking about a very heavy lift in terms of getting intel on something this specific, this narrow, out of an environment like China, that, yeah, unless we have some way to either steal that information or somehow magically get their cooperation and they open up the books and tell us what the fuck happened, we're not going to know.
But isn't it so interesting how the division in this country is so clear between left and right, that left is defending Fauci and not they're essentially ignoring all this information that he and the NIH funded that EcoHealth Alliance, which in turn funded what Rand Paul and many others believe you could describe as gain-of-function research.
Yeah.
They even refer to it in the same way in emails that were released, and Fauci lied in front of Congress when he was being questioned about this. Yeah, it's pretty clear, right?
Yeah, I think. Again, it's all based on where you sit and try. But if you try to assess this thing objectively, if it's possible to take the politics out of it, and you simply just look at what facts have been established, then you can certainly make the argument that Fauci lied about the extent to which he was aware of what was going on, and then the extent to which there was an effort to try to cover for the Wuhan lab and create a different narrative over this. So it's bullshit at this stage of the game that people still look at this and go, I don't know. It could have been still natural causes and maybe didn't come out of the lab. And that defies logic if you just simply look at pattern of behavior and evidence that exists currently, right? Much less what hopefully will come out.
And then new evidence about
intel
the three
sources.
people that worked at the lab that turned out to be sick with illnesses that resemble like 100% COVID-19 infection.
Yeah, I just think it's like everything else. Right? Going back full circle to what we started talking about, which was the Afghanistan withdrawal. If you were to read the transcripts from the first part of the hearings with the Armed Services Committee and the chairman, Reid, Democrat senator, he has the right to make the opening statement. Then he asks the first questions. And he frames the whole thing from the very beginning in a partisan way, simply by trying to essentially say any shit that happened here is not Biden's fault. It's because of the previous administration agreeing to this Doha agreement. And that's how he frames it. He doesn't start this hearing, this investigative hearing, by saying we've brought these, experts who've spent, each 4 decades in the military and were intimately involved in what was going on in Afghanistan. We brought them here to hear from them. He starts it out by framing the way that he would like this to go. This is how it fucking works there in Washington, right? Because we allow these people to stay in office forever, right? And nobody wants to make a brave decision because they're all worried about getting elected again. And so he starts that out. Then he asks questions, when he has the opportunity to start out by asking questions. And it's all about the Doha agreement. And don't you think that this was the problem? And it's just bullshit. Everything that goes on in Washington is either about not creating transparency or finding someone else to blame. And that's, again, for what it's worth, I think it's in part because of fucking term limits or the lack of. That's just me. But,
well, that seems to be a real problem for sure.
Yeah, but the China thing, I think is, in my mind, there's no doubt it's the lab, but I also have no doubt we're probably not going to get clarification of that because there's no upside for the Chinese to cooperate. They just don't. It's like everything else they do. They don't feel like they need to.
So it's too difficult to get like a definitive statement or a definitive timeline of exactly what happened and how it happened, and this is the cause.
Unless you can get your hands on one of the researchers that was inside the lab and is somehow willing to provide you with that intel. I mean, that's an enormous lift, right? It's like trying to get intel on the Iranian nuclear program or anything else. I mean, there's certain targets that have always been difficult, and in part it's because you have a small pool of people who have access to the information that you need to know or you want to know, and then you have very limited ability to get to those people. So again, it's they scrubbed whatever information may be available from open source, that's not available. And so I have a feeling that we're never going to get to the bottom of it necessarily, again, unless we get really lucky with a particular intel source. But there's no upside for the Chinese to say, you know what, now let's be open and transparent. Why would they?
It seems like the pandemic was particularly effective at dividing Americans. And obviously what's happening in Australia and France and quite a few other places where there are these massive protests, but you don't see the same in Russia and you don't see the same in China. Like, what about those countries? I mean, it seems like whatever strategy they have, if there really is some sort of a government-funded strategy to try to increase the division amongst the left and the right and just people in general in America and distrust in the system, this pandemic has turbocharged it for America, but maybe not so much for our enemies.
Well, yeah, in part that plays to our open society, right? Our access to information, right? And you look at a place like China where access to information is fairly
severely
limited.
Curated,
and you look at a place like Russia where people make jokes all the time about the Russian population's ability to suffer, and it's true, right? They can. It's pretty impressive, but I think with the U.S., I just think that they look at it, and yes, it's just another, I guess, to carry on from the point before about the active measures and the idea of driving wedges in. If I was sitting in the Russia desk, for active measures at the FSB, and I was sitting there and I thought to myself, now what can we do? Now what topic should we pursue? Now what area can we pull on to further create this dissension and this lack of unity and, the pandemic, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just another topic, just like racism, right? Or, fraudulent election or whatever it might be. It's just another target you can put on the table and go, now how do we do this? Oh, okay, look, what we need to do is look at this war between, anti-vaxxers and pro-vaxxers, right? Let's do something there. Let's focus on some misinformation there to drive that wedge in further. So for them, it's just another opportunity, and it's naive to think that they wouldn't take advantage of it. So, and it is. It's striking how we've politicized, the idea of the vaccine. Right? I don't know. I got vaccinated. But I don't give a fuck. I mean, everybody do what you're going to do, right? I can't get bent around the axle over, oh my God, you're not going to get. Who the fuck? It's your decision. It's your choice. I have no idea what anybody's thinking about that. You just do it. Fine, right? I mean, to me, that part of it, and yet, people are out there yielding their self-righteous swords of justice, talking about, you got to get vaccinated and the anxiety over the whole thing.
That's
right?
one of the real problems with social media, right? Is that this self-righteous, virtue signaling sort of behavior is encouraged. It's encouraged because people pile on. You get reinforcement. People reinforce your decision to post something aggressive. They're with you on it, and they're rewarded for this with likes and clicks and retweets.
Look at that! I got 1,000 new followers.
Exactly.
And, it's fantastic. And you see that. Sometimes you see like some of my favorite people on Twitter are like the people who claim like, I used to be a Republican, but now I just see, and they become some of the most woke people. Right. And that they're just every day they're posting some bullshit, right? And it's just simply so they can get that feedback, right?
Yes. Get that dopamine
hit. That dopamine hit, right?
Yeah. I mean, the opposite is true too. People who used to be on the left and they got red pilled, and now they're all in on this. And
yeah.
But the other thing is, like, you can't ignore all these issues either. So it's like, where do you go for sanity? Because like when someone says the election's a fraud, and you go, oh Jesus, do I pay attention to this? And then you see all these things like Maricopa County just found 17,000 duplicate ballots. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Is that an accident? Right. Or is that election fraud? If that's election fraud, that there's evidence of election fraud, 17,000 is a lot. Like 17,000 is oftentimes enough to win a district or a county, right?
Right. So the only way it works is if then you can say, okay, and you've got an impartial media that is out there saying, well, that's an interesting story, so I'll pursue that.
Exactly. You don't have that anymore.
No,
you have completely biased media, either for the left or for the right, and so much so that they're ignoring stories and even censoring them, stories that turn out to be accurate, like the lab leak hypothesis, right?
Right.
For the longest time, if you tried to put that on Facebook, they would ban it and they would ban you.
Yeah.
Now it's widely accepted that that's the primary theory.
But nobody goes back and says...
lets those people back on and says, sorry, we fucked you.
Right. Or you don't have any sort of intrepid investigative journalists going, okay, well, let's really dig into this now.
Right.
Let's take a look because, maybe I spent, 6 months, shitting on the story.
Right.
I'm certainly not going to do a reversal. So I think without and that people talk about that all the time, the objective media, and they talk about how it used to be objective. Well, it never really was, but
it was more objective.
It was
than it is
more,
now.
or they made the effort to appear objective,
Right.
Right, even though that they may not have been. They suppressed their own personal, and that at some point went away. And now, like everything else, we're conditioned, and we don't think it odd that you can open an entire New York Times article with nothing but anonymous sources, right?
Yes.
And you don't
Right.
have to justify what it
Exactly.
is that you're saying.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
But I don't think you can't walk that dog back. But again, going back to this idea of influencing the public, whether you're trying to get them to buy cigarettes or whether you're the Russians and you're trying to create more dissension. The only defense really comes down to the individual and each person taking a little bit of fucking responsibility and saying, I'm gonna curate my information a little bit better. I'm gonna pay a little bit more attention to what the fuck I'm reading or hearing. I'm gonna push back and question, regardless of whether it goes against, my point of view or not. Right? I mean, I got some really dear friends who are completely on the opposite side on certain issues. Yeah, but I love getting together with them. Yeah. Because, and we'll have great conversations, and sometimes is it argumentative? No, but at the end of the day, then we finish up and we have drinks, we have dinner, we hang out, we talk to about kids.
That's very rare.
Yeah,
it's very rare today because people decided that the other side is the enemy, and this is this wedge that you've brought up. It's been so effectively utilized, whether it's by design, which obviously we think it is a little bit, but also just through human nature. Whenever you're in a time of great stress, like now, people, they find comfort in groups, and they also like to gang up on people that don't agree with their ideology. And my concern is what you're saying about curating your own information. I've been telling people to try to do that as much as possible. I try to do that as much as possible, but I don't think the majority of people are on board with that. I think the majority of people, they will go to MSNBC, they will get the news that aligns with their ideology. They'll go to Fox. Mm-hmm. They'll get the news that aligns with their ideology, and then they'll point fingers at the other side of the fence and goes, these motherfuckers are ruining America.
Well, it's because they see it. Again, I guess I was really disappointed. I keep going back to this same Armed Services Committee hearing because I was really disappointed. I was expecting something more.
Right.
I don't know why. But it was so partisan, right? So the left was busy trying to figure out how to blame the previous administration, and the right was simply banging on, the Republican senators were simply banging on about we left people behind, and nobody was taking the opportunity of having these senior commanders in front of them, to ask impartial, objective questions. And actually they were all trying to make their own fucking point, which is always going to happen, which, again, I don't know why I was surprised, but it's inevitable. And every issue, including the pandemic, is framed in that way. And how do you walk this back, right? I mean, I know people that have become completely alienated from, others, friends of theirs, because of their opposing views on the pandemic. And they all want the same thing. They want to be safe and healthy, and they want their kids to be safe and healthy. Great. You choose to do this. You choose.
But people are so goddamn tribal. They've always been so tribal. It's a part of our DNA.
Yeah.
That it's so difficult for people to abandon those ideas and to reach across the aisle with earnestness and try to be kind to the other side and have a balanced, civilized conversation. It's not encouraged anymore. What's encouraged is calling people out. Tax the rich. That kind of shit.
Yeah.
What's encouraged is people with radical ideas that attack the other side, that attack the opposing ideology, and then a bunch of people get on board with it and start retweeting it, and then the other side gets even more furious, and people dig their heels in the sand.
Well, once you get this involved, right? Once you go public, right, and you tweet something, right, then that's when everything goes sideways, and you've got nothing but a goat rope, because that's when you get that piling on effect, right?
Yes.
People can, oh my God, look, I got my own community here, and I just got 50 more likes from my fucking post, and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I'm gonna lambast whoever this person is, and that person may not even be a person, and so we all come. It all comes
that's
back
part
to
of the problem.
Yeah. And so anyway, it's for what it's worth. Read multiple sources of information and investigate what the fuck you're reading.
Mike, where does this all go? If you had to I don't want a rose-colored glasses view of the world.
You're not going to get it from me.
I know, but I mean, where does this go? If you see how bad things have been divided since 2016, what happens by 2026? I mean, where do you see us?
Yeah, I don't think unless the internet shuts down and we all get back to some sort of other type of community-based communication. I don't think it's going to become less. It's not going to become less divisive. So that's sort of the starting point. We've hardened our positions because of a variety of reasons, right? So, I know people who are on the left who genuinely believe that anybody who doesn't think like them is stupid, right? And they need to be educated, and they need to be helped or brought along. And I know people on the right who think the same way about the left, right? And you're not going to fix that, right? You're not going to. It's not going to be something that comes along unless aliens manifest themselves, and then we've all got a common enemy. You're not going to fix this divide that exists. So what does that mean? Maybe it means we develop some other political opportunities, right? So we get a third party that's legitimate, right? That actually can play a role in the political process.
Can you envision anybody allowing that to happen?
No.
Because the powers that be on the left and the right are so entrenched, right?
Yeah, and that's where I know I bang on about this every now and then when we're talking, but that's why I keep going on about fucking term limits. I looked at that. I watched some of that, and I watched some hearings the other day on a different subject, and I look at these people. And I realize that these guys have been up on there doing these political jobs as senators or congresspeople, and they've been there for 35 or 40 years. And you think, what the fuck are we doing, right? And they're not that impressive as people anyway, right? And they've got a certain character flaw anyway because they went into politics. That's my opinion. But
mine as well.
Yeah. So how do we? And so you're right. That was a theoretical concept of throwing out a third or fourth party, but I think that would be very helpful in not healing, but in mitigating some of the problems from the device.
I think that the powers that be will do everything they can to keep that from happening, especially a third party that doesn't have all the trappings that the first two parties do, like the deeply entwined roots of the Democratic and the Republican parties. Like the Democrats they're not giving up what they have. And anybody that comes along that's reasonable, that's a third party. There was Brett Weinstein had an idea he called it Unity 2020, and he was going to reach across the aisle and say, like, take a qualified candidate from the left and a qualified candidate from the right and bring them together as a third alternative. But popular figures like Dan Crenshaw and Tulsi Gabbard, those were the two most likely candidates that they were talking about. Twitter removed their profile. They banned them. I mean, it makes no fucking sense. They said they were using bots. There was no evidence they were using bots.
Right. They
reviewed it. They confirmed their initial suspicions, they said, and wouldn't reinstate the thing. But their position was they were so worried that Trump was going to win and that all resources that could perhaps take votes away from the Democrats and Joe Biden needed to be stopped. And so this idea could potentially take people that would have voted for Biden because they were opposed to Trump, and now instead they're going to vote for Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Crenshaw. This is going to fuck things up for the Democrats.
Right. Which, I mean, they always make that argument, whether it's Ralph Nader or or Ross Perot or whomever.
Well, Ross Perot actually did do that.
Yeah,
that's why the argument is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
right.
But it's also fascinating because then you dip into that whole concept of the big tech and their impact on the same thing that we were talking about with Uri, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not as if Twitter's not involved in active measures, right? In their own way.
Well, the Hunter Biden story.
Right, yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Literally leading up to the election, there's some real interesting evidence of potential corruption. If he's telling the truth in these emails, he's saying that his father got 50% of all the stuff he got. I have to kick 50% up to the big guy.
Yeah.
This is what he's saying, which is that is corruption, right?
And
at its core.
And where do I think that is? I think that's Hunter Biden just blowing smoke, trying to get more money for himself, and so he's doing what a lot of people do in D.C. Do I
bullshitting?
Think? Well, exactly.
Right.
And
so there's no real evidence that he did get that money. Right. It could be just bullshit.
Right. Well, what I mean is, do I think Joe Biden sat around and go, "Yes, okay, son, I'll take 50%"? No, I think Hunter Biden's just is got some character flaws, and I think he's out there just
wait a minute. Yeah, you think Hunter Biden has character flaws?
Although he's a hell of an artist. Have you seen it?
Fucking artwork's going for big money.
Fantastic. $75,000 or $80,000. If he sells at the prices that they talk about at this exhibition that he's going to be doing.
If I was a dude who did a lot of coke and I had a bunch of money, I might be interested in a Biden in my house.
Yeah.
That's a Hunter Biden. That fucking guy.
Well, apparently they've hung some of it in the White House.
What?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, this is a story that came out, was that some of the stuff that he's done is going to be marketed now as having hung in the White House.
Oh, my
Which,
God.
that's a little sketchy from an ethics perspective.
Lot sketchy.
Yeah,
what does it look like? Can we see a Hunter Biden painting?
Yes.
I would like to see some of his work.
Abstract or
some
whether
of
it's...
I don't know anything about it. Some of the $75,000. I'm not a fan of modern art to begin with. I think a lot of it is shit.
Yeah.
Some of it's really interesting. Don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of it. Like we were talking about this couple that's getting divorced in Manhattan. Real estate developer is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and he has a $600 million art collection. So we put up this one painting that's worth somewhere between 40 and 60 million, and it looks like dog shit. It looks like something you and I could easily do.
Oh God!
It's just splatters.
I was in
nonsense.
I'm old enough that I was in when they opened the Sydney Opera House because I was living in Australia. I remember, we took a trip over to Sydney to see the Opera House. And we were walking through, and I was just a little kid, and we walked through, and there's a big Jackson Pollock there. And I looked at the Jackson Pollock, and I looked at my dad, and the tour guide was standing there, and I said, I could do that shit. I remember my dad still told that story until he died.
Is that a painting?
Oh.
It's mixed media, so
mixed
there
media.
is paint.
So it's photograph and then paint, and then that's not terrible. That's not terrible. Let me see some of his other shit. Because that right there is, let me tell you right now, that's not terrible either.
It said
maybe cocaine's really good for your creativity.
Some of it's hanging in his mom's office, so technically it's in the White House.
It looks a little paint by number-ish there.
I don't know. Let me go back to that. I could see that being in a gallery somewhere. That is not terrible.
Oh, I could definitely see, given on what else sells out there.
Yeah,
and that's the scheme of things. We've lowered the
Should I get a Hunter Biden for the studio?
Oh, if you could get a Hunter Biden,
are they hard to get? Look at that one right there.
I think if you're willing to pay enough money.
Is Hunter Biden's art any good?
Well, what's he doing? A line off of that? Oh, he's blowing the paint.
Yeah, he's blowing through it, so it's like a reverse.
Oh, some splatter paint. Dude, his art's not bad. I have to be honest. Hi, I'm on cocaine. And my dad's the president.
Look at him. He looks happy. Yeah. Doesn't he look happy?
Well, he's clean now. I shouldn't say he's on cocaine anymore. Hunter Biden snaps at critics of art dealings. Fuck them, he says. Wow.
Well, yeah.
That art is not bad. I'm telling you, I'm a little shocked. I'm saying this, but I'm just being honest.
I don't know if you can get a Biden.
I bet I could get a Biden.
Oh. I mean, NFT it.
I would.
No, with the NFTs. Do you think they're hard to get?
I think he's having an exhibit here soon.
I'm not paying $75,000.
And
he wouldn't come on the podcast.
Said up to $500K.
They when he was releasing his book, they touted him out $500K. Oh my God.
Then you could probably resell it because then it hung in your studio here. That's got to put a premium on it.
502.
Yeah.
Oh my God! His works are being offered for as much as $500,000 a piece.
They're hoping someone will buy it.
His art dealer said he would follow ethics guidelines that the Biden administration helped to develop.
Wow. Yeah, there's a push by, I forget who it is in the House Ethics Committee that says, look, we need to know who's buying his art so that it's not just a bunch of Chinese dealers looking to gain some influence.
Yeah, but the gallery in Soho says it will not disclose the identity of buyers or details of the sales. Interesting.
My God. Well,
imagine if that was Donald Trump Jr. I bet they would divulge all of that information. I bet they would dox those people. They would find out who's involved. They would go deep on that. They're giving him a free pass.
I don't think Don Jr.'s artwork would be
how the fuck do you know
that good.
I thought Hunter's was gonna suck.
I did actually. I'm
not bad.
Yeah, no, I've changed my opinion. I'm gonna talk to my wonderful wife and see whether we
see if you can scrape up a half a mil.
Put a little half mil. I know we were gonna buy a house, but maybe
maybe just get a painting that
just get a Hunter
splattered paint all over.
I'll just show it to my boys and say that's your college fund right there.
I gotta say it's not bad.
It's not bad, but would it sell for $500,000?
Probably not.
No, not if it was somebody else. But and I think that's the question. But what do I know?
What do I know?
What do I know?
Mike, tell everybody about your show one more time. Let's wrap this. Let's bring this bad boy home.
Should we?
This is a good one, but I feel bad about it. I feel like the future's fucked. I really do. At all our conversations, this one seems the most disturbing in terms of the implications for the future.
No, you're right. I always try to end on a happy note, and I don't know that I did. Well, we did with Hunter Biden because we agreed that it's better than we thought.
It's not bad.
So,
it's not bad. It's pretty good. And like I said, I wanted to have him on the podcast,
and he said no.
Well, they reached out initially. They touted him as a guest, and then somewhere along the line. I reached out back and I said, yeah, let's try to get him on. And then they passed. So they might have just thrown a bunch of shit out there in terms of like invitations. And then they said, oh, Rogan's probably going to ask you crazy shit. And
well, you know what that was?
Hookers.
That was the White House saying no.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So that was a messaging crew in the White House saying absolutely not.
Meanwhile, it would have probably been a great conversation. I'm not interested in making the guy feel bad. If I had him on, I would just... I don't fault the guy for having a drug problem. I've had a lot of people on here that have had drug problems.
And he's oddly enough, he's not the first person to take advantage of a family name in trying to further business.
Well, I wouldn't even be interested in that. Yeah. I would just want to know what is it like to be the son of Joe Biden. What is it like to get off of cocaine? What is it like to to have your whole life exposed to the world in the way he did? And what did he write a book recently? Is that what he did?
Yeah, he did. I don't know whether it's sold or not.
I haven't heard a peep about that book.
Yeah, but I think he's been more focused on the visual art.
Art's $500,000 a painting, man.
I would be pushing that shit out.
I'd be on Adderall right now in a gallery going, what next?
I'd be crapping out one canvas after another. So anyway, the show, Black Files Declassified. I don't know whether we want to run that trailer again because
no, we can't do that.
No, we can't do that. No, but
can't do that to people.
But it's coming up. We've been filming the second season, traveling all over the country and around the world.
When will it be released?
In the new year. We don't have a launch date yet, but after the holidays. And
the old episodes are available online.
Streaming, I believe, on Discovery Plus still. This is a big Science Channel program on the Discovery Network. Beautiful. And it's been a hell of a lot of fun, man.
Mike, always a pleasure. Appreciate you, sir. Thank you very much for being here.
Next time I'm going to be a lot more optimistic.
No. I like it like this.
All right.
Give me the truth. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bye.